Chapter 699. Protective Talisman? Pilgrimage Talisman? After listening to the shop assistant's words, Sumo was skeptical. Everything the shop assistant said seemed to make sense, but it always gave people a strange feeling. There seemed to be something unfathomable behind the pilgrimage and the Demon Moon royal family. Sumo, I'm afraid it's not that simple, Yi Wuhui said. And Sumo nodded in her heart. Her feeling was basically the same as Yi Wuhui's. Who in the Demon Moon royal family made these protective talismans? Sumo asked the shop assistant. Customer, I don't know. I haven't even entered the Demon Moon royal palace. How would I know who made them? Every once in a while, there would be a cultivator who would send the talismans over. The shop assistant said, The Demon Moon royal palace is under the Black Moon Tower? Sumo said, That's right. The shop assistant said, Customer, you don't want to go on pilgrimage, but you might as well go to the periphery of the Demon Moon royal palace. The scenery there is not bad. It's one of the sights of the moon capital. However, the Demon Moon royal palace is a forbidden area. You absolutely cannot enter, unless you walk on the pilgrimage road and kowtow all the way. Good. Thank you, brother. Sumo cupped her hands at the shop assistant and didn't ask any more questions. Then, she put away the protective talismans and continued to walk along the road. At this time, the cultivators on the pilgrimage road were still kowtowing. Sumo, are you going to enter the Demon Moon royal city? Yi Wuhui asked with a smile. Hee. Sumo laughed. What do you think? We're all here. Of course we have to go in and take a look. Yi Wuhui said. That's right. Sumo laughed. The story the shop assistant told me is a bit strange. I want to see if the Demon Moon royal family is really as benevolent as the shop assistant said. What kind of existence is the Black Moon Tower? And this desolate talisman, who wrote it? Is this enough for us to go in and take a look? Good. Sumo, I support you. Yi Wuhui said happily. Then let's enter the palace. You seem to be very excited. Sumo talked with Yi Wuhui through divine sense as they walked. Of course, Yi Wuhui said. Why? Sumo asked. Because I've never been out of the palace. Yi Wuhui said. I haven't even been to a mortal's palace, let alone a cultivator's palace. Huh? Sumo was speechless. What kind of reason was that? Why? Have you been to the cultivator palace before? Yi Wuhui asked. In my previous life, my Murong body was a prince of the Murong dynasty. Sumo sighs. Actually, I think whether it's a mortal palace or a cultivator's palace, there must be something inside. What? Yi Wuhui asked curiously. Loneliness. Sumo suddenly stopped in his tracks. He looked at the Black Moon Tower from afar and slowly said, Don't you feel that the black tower that stands between the heavens and the earth, looking down on everything, is extremely lonely? Oh, Yi Wuhui seemed to be stunned for a moment. Then he smiled lightly. Now that you mention it, it does look a little lonely. However, always thought that the palace was extremely luxurious and lively. I didn't expect you to say that it would be lonely in the palace. Luxurious is definitely luxurious, but I'm afraid that liveliness will never appear in the palace. The pinnacle of power is often lonely. Sumo sighed. At that moment, he thought of his past self. The Dark Lord was insufferably arrogant, but not many people could understand his loneliness. Yi Wuhui seemed to feel Sumo's state of mind, so he obediently didn't say anything. Sumo continued to walk in the direction of the Black Moon Tower. 100 miles was nothing to a cultivator. However, Sumo found that as the pilgrimage continued, there were fewer and fewer cultivators on the road. On the roadside, cultivators kept kneeling and crawling out of the pilgrimage. Their faces were pale, and in their hands were the remnants of a spirit talisman that had been burned. Needless to say, those were the so-called protective talismans. Those cultivators looked in the direction of the Black Tower with empty eyes. At that moment, no one knew what they were thinking. Moreover, most of them rested for more than 2 hours before they slowly got up. They looked extremely tired, both physically and mentally, and then they all left without saying a word. The people of the moon capital seemed to be familiar with such a scene, so their reaction was even colder. Sumo, it seems that guy was right. Only 1 in 100 miles can pass this pilgrimage. Yi Wu Hui said. Yes. If it was easy, there would be no need for pilgrimage. Sumo said. Sumo walked for another 10 miles, and what she saw and heard was almost the same. At this time, according to the time of the moon imperial planet, it was already noon. Thus, Sumo found a decent-sized inn on the side of the road and stayed there. These past few days, Sumo had been on the move, so he wanted to take a break. In the inn, Sumo set up a barrier and released the little white pig and the black feather god Hong. Yi Wu Hui made a move in her mind and walked out of his sea of consciousness. 2 people and 2 beasts stayed in the inn, waiting for dusk. The night of the moon imperial planet was a little later than Sumo had expected. However, the night of the moon imperial planet was very special. There were 8 moons in the void. 8 stars twined in the night sky. Together, they formed the shape of a crescent moon, but each had a different color. They set off each other, giving off a faint light. The night sky of the moon imperial planet was very beautiful. Sumo, what a beautiful night sky. Yi Wu Hui held the little white pig in his arms, leaned against the window, and said quietly. At that moment, under the moonlight, Yi Wu Hui's soul looked like a dream. The little white pig was lying comfortably in Yi Wu Hui's arms. It seemed that the embrace of the soul made it very comfortable. The black feather god Hong stood proudly in the corner of the room. He closed his eyes and stood on one leg. He had no interest in the so-called moonlight night. Sitting cross-legged on the bed, Sumo gently opened her eyes. Missy, did you really travel to many worlds with Bumyaotian? Of course. Yi Wu Hui was a little confused by Sumo's question. Then why do you look like you've never seen anything? Sumo said lightly. This kind of night is not rare in the Yizong world, is it? Huh? Yi Wu Hui couldn't help but frown. Then, he turned around and said to Sumo, Sumo, haven't you heard of a saying? What saying? Sumo asked. It's not about the distance, it's about where to go. It's not about where to go, it's about who you are with. Why don't you understand the thoughts of a girl? The little white pig in Yi Wu Hui's arms hummed in agreement. The black feather god Hong opened his eyes, as if he was glaring fiercely at the little white pig. Seeing this, the little white pig hurriedly hid his head in Yi Wu Hui's arms. Hee. Sumo laughed helplessly, but didn't reply. Actually, it wasn't that he didn't understand. It was just that he didn't want to understand Yi Wu Hui too much. Yi Wu Hui sighed softly, then turned around and continued to look at the night. And at this moment, between the 8 moons, a strange red light suddenly lit up and then went straight to the Black Moon Tower. That brilliance was like a giant bat. At that moment, a strange aura spread out from Moon Capital. Bloodbat? Inside Moon Capital, someone exclaimed. Sumo couldn't help but frown slightly. Chapter 700. The Demon Moon Imperial Palace was a forbidden area for the people of Moon Capital. There is only one way to enter the Demon Moon Imperial Palace. That was the pilgrimage path. In fact, the entire Demon Moon Imperial Palace was surrounded by array restrictions, and they were all reincarnation level restrictions. Even ordinary reincarnation level cultivators would not be able to enter. Ordinary cultivators would not be able to see or touch these spirit formations. However, Sumo was not an ordinary cultivator. Her knowledge was enough for her to enter the Demon Moon Imperial Palace as if she was walking on flat ground. Gently lifting her foot, Sumo took a step to the left and passed through the protective array of the Demon Moon Imperial Palace. It was completely silent. However, at that moment, Sumo felt as if she had passed through an invisible water curtain. Hua! The gentle sound of flowing water echoed in her ears. Immediately, what appeared in front of Sumo was a world that was completely different from the safety she saw before. What came into view was an extremely spacious square. It had a circumference of hundreds of feet. On the other side of the square was an extremely majestic palace. The palace was black, and there were dozens of steps leading to the palace. This was something that could not be seen from the outside of the palace. Here, there were no so-called undulating mountain ranges, and there were no colorful lights either. The only similarity was that behind the palace, there was a black pagoda. However, that black pagoda was definitely not as tall as it was in Moon Capital. The so-called Tower of the Black Moon was actually only 1,000 feet tall. Empty, lonely, and without any signs of life. That was the first impression that this place gave people. Sumo, this Demon Moon Imperial Palace, is actually wrapped in an illusion technique. Yi Wuhui was a little surprised. Yes. Sumo nodded her head lightly. The inside and outside of the palace are two different worlds. This place was set up by a reincarnation-level cultivator. What the people of Moon Capital see is just an illusion. This place is really lonely. Yi Wuhui sighed. In Sumo's sea of consciousness, she could feel the loneliness and oppression of the Demon Moon Imperial Palace. That mother and son pair have disappeared, Yi Wuhui said again. Sumo turned her gaze to the palace gate, which should correspond to the direction where the mother and son pair entered. However, it was completely empty. There was nothing there. The mother and son pair seemed to have disappeared. At this moment, Sumo's technique enveloped his whole body. He did not spread out his divine sense, because he had to first hide himself. After all, there were reincarnation-level cultivators in the Demon Moon Imperial Palace. Although Sumo and Yi Wuhui were the holy land of the Demon Moon world, there was no life here. The Demon Moon Imperial Palace is the holy land of the entire Demon Moon world, but there is no sign of life. Everything here formed a strong contrast with the moonlight capital outside. Dang, clang moon. At this moment, an extremely heavy bell sound came from within the Black Palace. The sound of the bell seemed to have come from an extremely distant past, as it suddenly reverberated. Long bell, 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 bell. Sumo couldn't help but be slightly startled. He instinctively took a step back. Palace! In an instant, along with the sound of the bell, the originally dim square suddenly lit up with countless lights. Those lights were lit up from the ground in the middle of the square. Each of the lamps had a diameter of 3 feet. Their flames leaped about, looking somewhat demonic. They were like red lotuses in hell, yet they were also like bloodthirsty, dancing girls in red. Huang, Yi Wuhui said in alarm. That's right. Those blood-red lights formed an extra desolate character in the center of the square. Sumo furrowed his brows. At this moment, he was hidden in a shadow in the corner of the palace, like a ghost spying on everything. Ku, mi, ma, ku. As the lights lit up, the ringing of the bells in the palace gradually stopped, but an inexplicable chanting sound rang out. At that moment, there seemed to be many cultivators gathered together, singing a special ancient scripture. What scripture is that? Sumo asked. Never heard of it. Yi Wuhui answered. Ku, mi ku. The chanting gradually became louder and louder, like streams converging into an ocean. Waves tens of millions of zhangtal rose layer by layer, unstoppable. Creak! The Black Palace Gate, which was dozens of zhangtal, slowly opened. Then, 2 rows of cultivators in black robes came out. They all wore long black robes that completely covered their heads and faces. They bowed, and each of them held a paper lantern in their hands. They were all God-burying realm cultivators. They were all chanting the ancient scripture. Behind them were 2 rows of cultivators in white robes. They also covered their heads and faces, and their bodies were also bowed. However, in their hands were paper lanterns that emitted green light. They were all world-breaking realm cultivators. The green and red contrasted each other, and it was quite strange. The 2 groups of cultivators were rushing forward with small steps. Then, they stood in 2 circles around the desolate character in the center of the square. They did not stop chanting, and they were very rhythmic. Sumo, they seem to be performing some kind of mysterious ritual, Yi Wuhui said. Yes. Sumo gently nodded. Suddenly, the pitch of their voices rose sharply. The palace glowed brightly, and then 2 rows of cultivators in red robes walked out. There were a total of 18 of them. They also covered their heads and faces, but they did not carry lanterns. They were Sea Destruction Realm cultivators. Such a formation of cultivators was enough to show how powerful the Demon Moon world was. The Sea Annihilation Realm cultivators bowed, holding all kinds of Dharma artifacts. Sumo had never seen those artifacts before, but one of them caught Sumo's attention. The plum blossom staff. Sumo's eyes narrowed, because that was not Wu Air's plum blossom staff, but from the looks of it, it was almost identical. That plum blossom staff was obviously a replica of the real one. These 18 cultivators did not form a circle like the black and white cultivators before. Instead, they lined up at the bottom of the Black Palace's steps. There were more cultivators behind. Sumo and Yi Wu Hui did not say anything. Everything in front of them was enough to shock them. Ku, me, hum. All the cultivators were chanting the incantation. Looking again, for cultivators slowly walked out of the Black Palace's doors. The 4 cultivators were all wearing silver robes. They shone with dazzling silver light. What shocked Sumo the most was that the 4 of them were carrying a black coffin. At that moment, Sumo could not help but frown. The coffin was a very sensitive existence to Sumo. The black coffin was covered with all kinds of runes, but those runes did not belong to the 3 realms. It was not a coffin from the 3 realms. Of course, it was not one of the 9 coffins. The Silver Robe cultivators were all one-lifetime immortal realm cultivators, and all of them were in the late stage. They did not bow, but they all wore silver masks. From their exposed eyes, it could be seen that they were extremely solemn. They carried the coffin, their footsteps firm and steady as they headed straight for the Desolation Lantern Array. Chapter 701. Bloodbat. Yi Wu Hui also heard someone exclaiming outside the inn. "Let's go out and take a look," Sumo said. Then he waved his hand and took back the little white pig and the black feather god. Yi Wu Hui also returned to Sumo's sea of consciousness. Then Sumo stepped out of the inn and went to the courtyard of the inn. At this time, there were many cultivators standing in the courtyard of the inn. They had all noticed the abnormality in the night sky and were discussing with each other. "Fellow cultivator, what just flew across the void?" Sumo asked the cultivator next to her. "It seems to be a bloodbat." That cultivator was in the middle stage of the breaking realm. At this moment, his eyes were slightly furrowed, as if he was thinking about something. It seemed that he was also not too sure. Several cultivators around him basically had the same expression. "What is a bloodbat?" Sumo asked again. "It is a kind of demon bat in the Dead Soul Star region. Its magic power is strong, and it wanders among the stars. It specializes in feeding on the blood of cultivators or dead souls. It is said that there is only one bloodbat in the entire Demon Moon world." "Only one bloodbat?" Sumo frowned. "Is it raised by the Demon Moon royal family?" "Yes." The Breaking Realm cultivator nodded. The Demon Moon royal family did raise one. However, it should not have run out of the palace. That bloodbat has been imprisoned in the Black Moon Tower by the royal family. However, the shadow and aura just now are exactly the same as the legendary bloodbat. There's an 80 to 90% chance that it's that monster. Another cultivator chimed in. AI. There were other cultivators who let out long sighs. Sumo did not ask any more questions, because no one dared to be sure. At this time, the red shadow in the void had completely disappeared under the Black Moon Tower. That strange aura also disappeared. "Sumo, let's enter the palace," Yi Wu Hui said. "Let's see what is going on." Hung Hung, who was in the storage bag, actually agreed softly. "All right." Sumo nodded without hesitation. Immediately after, he took a step forward and headed straight for the Demon Moon Palace from the inn. Sigh. Bloodbats were undead creatures. The Breakworld cultivator looked in the direction of the Black Moon Tower and shook his head. He sighed. Now that the moon has appeared, it is a very bad sign. When he turned his head, he seemed to want to say a few words to Sumo, but he found that Sumo, who had just spoken to him, had already disappeared without a trace. Elite. The Breakworld cultivator had a wry smile, but he did not care. It was not surprising that there were hidden dragons and crouching tigers in the Demon Moon world. At this moment, many of the surrounding cultivators wore solemn expressions. That was because the Breakworld cultivator hadn't told Sumo that hundreds of thousands of years ago, bloodbats had appeared on a moonlit night. That had led to a catastrophe on the Moon King planet. Bloodbats were ominous to the demonic moon world. Demon Moon's royal family. They were the most ancient and powerful race in the entire Demon Moon world. Their history, no one could explain clearly. However, they had ruled the Demon Moon world for tens of thousands of years. At this time, Sumo was standing outside the Demon Moon Palace. Just as the shop assistant had said, the Demon Moon Palace was a beautiful place in Moontown. It was actually located on a big mountain. The people of Moontown called the Moon King Mountain. No one knew whether the Moon King planet got its name from the mountain or whether the mountain got its name from the Moon King planet. The Demon Moon Palace was built on the mountain. It was very spectacular. The night of the Moon King planet was intoxicating. At this time, the Demon Moon Palace was brightly lit. The colors were blurred, and it was endlessly gorgeous. Sumo, the scenery here is so beautiful. Yi Wuhui complimented. Thinking about what Yi Wuhui had said in the inn, Sumo smiled and did not respond. Perhaps, as long as Sumo was there, Yi Wuhui would see everything as beautiful. At the foot of the mountain, the pilgrimage road was like a snake. However, there were not many Demon Moon cultivators who could get there. Although there were few, there were still some. At this moment, the one closest to the Demon Moon Palace was a woman. She was accompanied by a boy of 7 or 8 years old. It seemed that they were a mother and a son. The woman was dressed in a plain cotton dress, and her appearance was ordinary. The boy was also wearing plain clothes, which were patched. The boy's face was not good. It was white and yellow, as if he was seriously ill. His body was thin, and his clothes were very loose. Mortals, Sumo could not help but be stunned, because there was no fluctuation of spiritual chi on the woman and the child. Sumo was sure that they were definitely not cultivators of a higher level, but mortals. At the same time, Sumo saw that the knees of the woman and the child had been worn out. Their trousers were stained with coagulated blood, and their knees were rotten and bloody. Their movements were extremely slow. Every movement of kneeling seemed to exhaust the last of their strength. However, their eyes were very firm. It was hard to imagine how they worshipped for more than 100 miles on the pilgrimage road with their mortal bodies. "Mother, we're almost there," the little boy said. "And," the woman nodded gently. "Schwanger, we're almost there. We can't stop on the pilgrimage road. Hold on a little longer, okay?" The little boy smiled. "Mother, I know. I'm fine, I can hold on. When we reach the palace, will my illness be cured?" "Definitely." The woman smiled knowingly and then touched the little boy's head. "The Demon Moon royal family will grant all requests. Your illness will definitely be cured." "Good." The little boy smiled. "Mother, I'm cured. I want to eat meat buns." "Good. Mother will definitely make the best meat buns for you." Although the mother and daughter were talking, their movements did not stop. They crawled on their knees, step by step, extremely pious. On the pilgrimage road, they left their blood stains. However, when they walked 3 feet away, the blood stains disappeared automatically. The blood stains had all melted into the black cobblestones. "Sumo, what's wrong with that boy?" Yi Wuhui said. "It's a mortal's illness in an immortal city. Does he still need to walk the pilgrimage road to seek help from the palace?" "That boy doesn't seem to be ill." Sumo also frowned. "His physique seems to be a little weak, but I can't see any other problems." "You're right. Not to mention that there are great cultivators everywhere in Moon Capital. A mortal's illness can be cured. Even a child cultivator might be able to cure him. This matter is indeed strange." What's even more strange is that so many great cultivators withdrew midway. They're a pair of mortals, yet they're about to enter the palace? Yi Wuhui said again. "Perhaps their minds are pure, and they don't have inner demons." Sumo guessed. At this time, not far behind the mother and son was an old man. Peak Sea Destruction Realm. That old man's realm could be said to be extremely high. There was not a trace of injury on his body, and his movements were quite agile. He was the one who had the highest realm of pilgrimage that Sumo had seen during the day. Relatively speaking, his physical body was unparalleled. However, the mother and son were already close to the palace gate, so he could not catch up. "Sumo, they're going in," Yi Wuhui said. Looking again at the end of the pilgrimage road, there was a round platform. The mother and son had just stepped onto the round platform and immediately disappeared. Let's go. Sumo narrowed her eyes. The palace was surrounded by Dharma formations. However, how could they stop Sumo? Sumo silently recited a spell and took a step forward. Chapter 702. The Demon Moon Imperial Palace was a forbidden area for the people of Moon Capital. There was only one way to enter the Demon Moon Imperial Palace. That was the pilgrimage path. In fact, the entire Demon Moon Imperial Palace was surrounded by array restrictions, and they were all reincarnation level restrictions. Even ordinary reincarnation level cultivators would not be able to enter. Ordinary cultivators would not be able to see or touch these spirit formations. However, Sumo was not an ordinary cultivator. Her knowledge was enough for her to enter the Demon Moon Imperial Palace as if she was walking on flat ground. Gently lifting her foot, Sumo took a step to the left and passed through the protective array of the Demon Moon Imperial Palace. It was completely silent. However, at that moment, Sumo felt as if she had passed through an invisible water curtain. Hua! The gentle sound of flowing water echoed in her ears. Immediately, what appeared in front of Sumo was a world that was completely different from the safety she saw before. What came into view was an extremely spacious square. It had a circumference of hundreds of feet. On the other side of the square was an extremely majestic palace. The palace was black, and there were dozens of steps leading to the palace. This was something that could not be seen from the outside of the palace. Here, there were no mountain ranges at all, nor were there any colorful lights. The only similarity was that behind the palace, there was a black pagoda. However, that black pagoda was definitely not as tall as it was in Moon Capital. The so-called Black Pagoda was actually only hundreds of feet tall, empty, lonely, and without any signs of life. That was the first impression that this place gave people. Sumo, this Demon Moon Imperial Palace, is actually wrapped in an illusion technique. Yi Wu-Hui was a little surprised. Yes, Sumo nodded her head lightly. The inside and outside of the palace are two different worlds. This place was set up by a reincarnation-level cultivator. What the people of Moon Capital see is just an illusion. This place is really lonely. Yi Wu-Hui sighed. In Sumo's sea of consciousness, she could feel the loneliness and oppression of the Demon Moon Imperial Palace. That mother and son pair have disappeared, Yi Wu-Hui said again. Sumo turned her gaze to the gate of the Imperial Palace, which should correspond to the direction where the mother and son on the pilgrimage had entered. However, it was empty. There was nothing there. The mother and son seemed to have disappeared. At this time, Sumo's technique enveloped her entire body. His divine sense did not spread out, because he had to conceal himself first. After all, there were rebirth realm cultivators in the Demon Moon Palace. Although Sumo and Yi Wu-Hui were mentally prepared, everything here was beyond their imagination. The Demon Moon Imperial Palace is the holy land of the entire Demon Moon world, but there is no sign of life. Everything here formed a strong contrast with the moonlight capital outside. Ding, ding, hum. At this moment, an extremely heavy bell sound came from within the Black Palace. The sound of the bell seemed to have come from an extremely distant past, as it suddenly reverberated. Distant, long, and ancient. Sumo couldn't help but be slightly startled. He instinctively took a step back. Whoosh! In an instant, following the sound of the bell, the originally dim square suddenly lit up with countless lights. Those lights were lit up from the ground in the middle of the square. Each of the lights had a diameter of 3 feet. Their flames danced, somewhat bewitching. They were like red lotuses from hell, and also like bloodthirsty, dancing girls in red. Desolation, Yi Wu-Hui exclaimed. That's right. Those blood-red lights formed an additional desolation character in the middle of the square. Sumo's brows were tightly knitted. At this time, he was hiding in a shadow in the corner of the palace, like a spying ghost. Ku, ma, ku. As the lights lit up, the bell sound in the palace gradually stopped, but an indescribable chanting sound could be heard. At that moment, it seemed that many cultivators had gathered together and were singing a special ancient scripture. What scripture is that? Sumo asked. Never heard of it. Yi Wuhui answered. Ku, me, ku. The chanting sound gradually became louder, like a small stream converging into an ocean. Tens of millions of feet of waves rose layer by layer, unstoppable. Creak! The dozens of feet tall black palace gate slowly opened. Then 2 rows of cultivators in black robes came out. They were all wearing long black robes that completely covered their heads and faces. They were hunched over, and each of them held a paper lantern in their hands. They were all God-bearing realm cultivators. They were all chanting the ancient scripture. Behind them were 2 rows of cultivators in white robes. They also covered their heads and faces, and they were also hunched over. However, in their hands were paper lanterns that emitted green light. They were all world-breaking realm cultivators. The green and red contrasted each other, and it was quite strange. The 2 groups of cultivators were hurrying forward with small steps. Then, they stood in 2 circles around the desolation character in the middle of the square. Their chanting did not stop, and it was very rhythmic. Sumo, they seem to be performing some kind of mysterious ritual, Yi Wuhui said. Yes. Sumo gently nodded. Suddenly, the pitch of their voices rose. The palace glowed brightly, and then 2 rows of cultivators in red robes walked out. There were a total of 18 of them. They also covered their heads and faces, but they did not carry lanterns. They were Sea Destruction Realm cultivators. Such a formation of cultivators was enough to show how powerful the Demon Moon world was. The Sea Destruction Realm cultivators bowed over, holding all kinds of ritual implements. Sumo had never seen those ritual implements before, but one of them caught Sumo's attention. A plum blossom staff. Sumo could not help but narrow her eyes. It was not Wu Air's plum blossom staff, but it looked almost the same. That plum blossom staff was clearly a replica of the real plum blossom staff. These 18 cultivators did not form a circle like the black and white cultivators. Instead, they lined up under the Black Palace's steps. There were more cultivators behind them. Sumo and Yi Wuhui did not say anything. Everything in front of them was enough to shock them. Ku, me, hum. All the cultivators were chanting the incantation. Looking again, 4 cultivators slowly walked out of the Black Palace's doors. The 4 cultivators were all wearing silver robes. They shone with dazzling silver light. What shocked Sumo the most was that the 4 of them were carrying a black coffin. At that moment, Sumo could not help but frown. A coffin was an extremely sensitive existence to Sumo. The black coffin was covered with all kinds of runes, but those runes did not belong to the 3 realms. It was not a coffin from the 3 realms. Of course, it was not one of 9 coffins either. The silver-robed cultivators were all one-lifetime immortal realm cultivators, and all of them were in the late stage. They did not bow over, but they all wore silver masks. From their exposed eyes, one could see that they were extremely solemn. They carried the coffin forward, their steps steady and sonorous as they headed straight for the desolation lantern array. Chapter 703. Night, Palace, Red Light, Black Coffin. The scene inside the Demon Moon Palace was strange and spectacular. The 4 great silver-robed cultivators carrying the coffin gave people a strong sense of impact. What kind of ceremony are they performing? Yi Wuhui asked. Sumo shook her head. He also had no clue. At this moment, the 4 silver-robed cultivators walked straight into the red light formation. They carried the coffin and stood in the middle of the word desolate. The voice of the scripture recitation became slightly softer. All the cultivators seemed to be waiting for more important people to appear. Sumo and Yi Wuhui also had the same feeling that there would definitely be more cultivators coming out of the Black Palace. As expected, when a silver-robed cultivator carrying the coffin stood still, another 3 cultivators walked out of the Black Palace. The leading cultivator wore a black and white robe. On his face, there was a strange mask. That mask was different from the silver-robed cultivators. The patterns on it were very special, and it did not even show the eyes. It gave people a very mysterious feeling. Rebirth Realm. Yi Wuhui could not help but be shocked. Her tone was still a bit uncertain. After all, her own realm was only one world immortal. Rebirth Realm Rank 5. Sumo said slowly. The same realm as you. Yi Wuhui secretly frowned. Rebirth Realm Rank 5. Even in Izong World, they could be considered experts. Demon Moon World is only a small world. How can there be such a powerful person? Indeed, it is a bit surprising. Sumo smiled faintly. However, I feel that there will be more surprises later. Yes. Yi Wuhui nodded. Don't worry. As long as they are not in the Venerable Realm, I can kill them all. Sumo said calmly. Let's hope there are no Venerable Realm experts. Yi Wuhui was a bit uncertain. The three cultivators slowly walked down the steps of the Grand Hall. Behind the cultivator of the fifth rebirth realm were two female cultivators. They did not wear long robes, but rather dresses that showed their figures. Her figure was graceful and extremely alluring. None of them were wearing masks. Their beautiful eyes were flowing with light, and they were endlessly enchanting. However, they were following closely behind the cultivator at the fifth level of the rebirth realm. They walked down the stairs, but they didn't reach the desolation character light array. Instead, he stopped 100 feet away from the light array. Kumi, hum. In the square, all the cultivators suddenly raised their voices and then abruptly stopped. Roar. The rebirth level cultivator stood still and roared. In an instant, the entire square was filled with his sound waves. His voice wasn't loud, but it was clearly transmitted into everyone's ears. Roar. Then, all the cultivators present echoed in unison. Layers of sound waves spread out like water. Looking again, the rebirth realm cultivator extended his arms towards the black coffin and bowed deeply. From the looks of it, it was a special etiquette of the Demon Moon world. All the voices quieted down again. Great Emperor, the rebirth realm cultivator finally spoke. His voice was old and hoarse. From his voice, Sumo guessed that he should be an old cultivator. Great Emperor? Sumo and Yi Wuhui were both moved. Could it be that the Emperor of the Demon Moon was lying in that black coffin? Today, we will once again offer our meager offerings. May you wake up soon and open your eyes soon. Your light is the hope of all your people. The rebirth realm cultivator's voice was extremely solemn and low. The entire palace was silent. Those cultivators carrying the lanterns, the magic weapons, and the coffin remained motionless. They were like statues. However, the lights on the square flickered, and it was unusually lively. Offerings? Sumo, could the offerings be that pair of... Before Yi Wuhui could finish his sentence, he received confirmation. Whoosh! The rebirth realm cultivator waved his hand. A black round platform appeared in the sky above the square. It floated between the rebirth realm cultivator and the black coffin. On the black round table, there were 3 corpses lying straight on the ground. 2 of them were the mother and son from before, while the other one was the old cultivator at the peak of the sea destruction realm. They were lying on the round platform with their eyes closed. Sumo, are they dead? Yi Wuhui still did not believe his own judgment. Yes. Sumo's voice was slightly heavy. Just now, they had just heard the warm and pitiful conversation between the mother and son. They did not expect them to be 2 cold corpses now. Why? Yi Wuhui's tone was filled with anger. They are a pair of pitiful mortals, not to mention that they have a child. Sumo frowned. Their souls have been extracted. The same goes for the destruction sea realm cultivator. Extracted souls. Yi Wuhui did not understand. What is the royal family of the Devil Moon doing? It should be a sacrifice. Sumo said, Great Emperor, please accept our sincere tribute. At this moment, the reincarnation realm cultivator shouted loudly. At the same time, he waved his hand again. Creak, creak. The 4 silver-robed cultivators carrying the black coffin knelt on one knee. As for the black coffin, it slowly opened. A faint black fog spread out from inside. Roar, swish. Apart from the rebirth realm cultivator, all the other cultivators, including the 2 coquettish female cultivators, knelt on the ground. At that moment, Sumo and Yi Wuhui were nervous. They did not know what would come out of the black coffin. Great Emperor, Great Moon Emperor, please wake up from your deep sleep. I pray for your light to illuminate the entire Devil Moon world. The Rebirth Realm cultivator's voice was bleak. Whoosh, whoosh, suddenly, a black wind blew across the square. The black wind seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. The red lanterns on the square flickered rapidly, but none of them were extinguished. At the same time, the lanterns in the hands of all the cultivators shone brightly. It seemed that they were prepared for the arrival of the black wind. Looking again, the lid of the black coffin was already floating. In the black fog, a corpse wrapped in black cloth gradually appeared. However, the corpse was not long. From its length, it seemed to be the corpse of an 11 or 12-year-old child. Emperor, great Emperor! All the cultivators of the Devil Moon shouted loudly. Their voices shook the heavens. However, Sumo understood that everything that happened here could not be transmitted out of the Devil Moon Palace. This palace and Moon Capital were not the same world. Whoosh! At this moment, the corpse on the black round platform instantly turned into black fog. In the black fog, there were specks of soul light that went straight to the black coffin. Soul absorption. The corpse that appeared on top of the black coffin slowly stood up. The black cloth wrapped around his body began to open layer by layer. The black cloth was like a snake floating in the void. Then, the face of an 11 or 12-year-old boy was revealed. His face was pale, his lips were gray, and there was not a trace of blood. However, there was a gray Huang character tattooed between his eyebrows. There was also an additional stroke. Chapter 704. Huang. Yi Wuhui's heart skipped a beat. Sumo, is that Xiao Huang? At this time, Sumo's brows were tightly knitted. His eyes were already pitch black. The young man in the black coffin had his eyes closed, like a dead person. Sumo activated his magic eye. He could see that there was a gray stream of air slowly flowing in the young man's body. It was a very special kind of spiritual energy. No, Sumo replied. Appearance or aura? Yi Wuhui asked. Neither. Sumo shook his head. Perhaps this young man is related to Huang, but he is definitely not Xiao Huang, or what? Or he is not Xiao Huang right now. Sumo speculated. What do you mean? Yi Wuhui was a little puzzled. Right now, that young man is a sleeping body. His aura is almost completely restrained. In other words, this young man is between the dead and the living. I can't completely see through him. Sumo said. Oh. Yi Wuhui responded and did not ask any more questions. Looking again, the square changed again. The young man in black slowly opened his mouth, and the black mist formed by the mother and son and the sea destruction realm cultivator was all absorbed by him. Boom! Hum! Roar! At that moment, all the demon moon cultivators let out a celebratory sound. However, that sound was extremely harsh to Sumo and Yi Wuhui. Emperor, great Emperor, please enjoy our sacrifices to your heart's content. They have the most pious and purest hearts. They're all your food. The pilgrims, the best pilgrims, were all sacrifices, even food. This was probably a problem that the cultivators of Moon Capital, or even the entire Demon Moon world, would never think of. This scene made Sumo and Yi Wuhui's hearts cold. Was this the so-called royal family? The heart of a mortal, the soul of a cultivator. Yi Wuhui coldly said, This Devil Moon Imperial family is simply a demon. Hee. Sumo sneered without saying a word. At this moment, the black-robed youth had absorbed all the black mist. His face didn't seem as pale as before. However, he still stood in the void like a zombie. Black ribbons floated around him. The entire square was silent. The only things that jumped were the black belt, as well as the green and red lights. The silence lasted for a full quarter of an hour. The rebirth level cultivator bowed deeply and remained motionless, not saying a word. What were they waiting for? Yi Wuhui couldn't help but ask. Sumo shook her head. As soon as Yi Wuhui finished speaking, the young man in black slowly raised his hands and formed a circle in front of his chest. He seemed to be forming a seal. That scene was very strange. The black-robed youth's movements were very natural, not stiff at all, and could even be described as flowing water. Judging from his movements, he didn't look like an 11 or 12-year-old youth at all, but a great cultivator who had cultivated for many years. However, the black-robed youth didn't form a seal. Instead, he formed a Tai Chi shape in front of his chest. Black and white were distinct, shining brightly. Whoosh! At the same time, the black-robed youth gently opened his mouth and breathed out a stream of black gas. Hum, hum, roar. The rebirth level cultivator was the first to stand up straight. He began to recite the sutra just now, and all the cultivators recited it in unison. As the sutra recited, the black gas that the black-robed youth breathed out began to gradually solidify. It actually transformed into the mother and son, as well as the perfected sea destruction level cultivator. Sumo. Yiwu almost shouted in Sumo's sea of consciousness, because it was really too incredible. Those are no longer the mother and son and the sea destruction level cultivator, Sumo said in a low voice. They only have the form but not the soul. Oh, Yiwu said. You'll understand in a moment, Sumo said. When he looked again, the mother and son, as well as the cultivator in the sea annihilation realm, slowly opened their eyes. A black light flashed in the depths of their eyes, and then they gradually returned to normal. Greetings, my emperor. Thank you, my emperor, for giving us a new life. The three of them knelt on the black round platform with their shoes on. Their voices were a little special. Sumo and Yiwu could both hear that the mother and son's voices were a little strange. It seemed that they hadn't completely adapted to their new bodies. Their voices were mixed with a bit of old age. Welcome, emissary, to the Moon Empress. The rebirth level cultivator bowed deeply to the three of them. Thank you, High Priest. The three of them also stood up and bowed deeply to the rebirth level cultivator. At this moment, the black cloths that the black-robed youth spread out began to gradually retract. They were winding back to the black-robed youth's body one by one. At that moment, the black-robed youth seemed to have completed his mission. To be honest, Sumo couldn't understand what this ceremony meant. However, she and Yiwu were sure that it wasn't a gift of justice. The Demon Moon royal family's behavior was more like a cult. Ku, me, hum. The rebirth level high priest began to chant again. The voice was almost the same as before. The mother and son and the sea destruction level cultivator were all making hand seals. Their bodies were fading bit by bit, as if they were going to disappear soon. They had completed their pilgrimage. Hee hee hee, hee hee. At this moment, a strange laughter suddenly appeared in the void. The laughter was a little sharp and piercing, and at the same time, full of mockery. The rebirth level high priest couldn't help but look up. Who? He was looking in the direction of Sumo. However, Sumo was confident that he could hide in the shadows, and his concealment technique was definitely at the level of a venerable. Therefore, Sumo was extremely calm. As expected, a voice came from above Sumo. What a moonlit night banquet. It was a sharp voice that was neither male nor female. High Priest of the Demon Moon, is everything you have done worthy of the people of the Demon Moon? Soul for soul, soul for soul. Even if you have awakened the Moon Empress, she is still a demon. That is not the real Moon Empress. As he spoke, there was a fluctuation in the void. Looking again, a tall and thin cultivator in a red robe stood in the void of the square. He looked like a male cultivator, but he was wearing a tall, pointy white hat that was at least 3 feet tall. His face was covered with white powder, and even had a blush on. His lips were also bright red. On his ear, there was a blood-red flower. That red flower was somewhat similar to Sumo's blood-red rose. Rebirth level 7. Sumo couldn't help but be shocked. This neither male nor female cultivator actually had such a high cultivation. Sumo, is this cultivator male or female? Yiwu voice actually had a trace of fear. Indeed, that clown-like cultivator gave people a very uncomfortable feeling. Chunyu-cho, the rebirth level high priest's voice sank. Don't disturb our pre-ceremony. Otherwise, the Moon Empress will be furious and tear you into pieces. Hee hee, hee hee. Mo Zhong Cho laughed weirdly. Moon Empress will be furious? May I ask, where is the Moon Empress? Is the puppet in the black coffin the Moon Empress? High Priest, how long are you going to deceive all living beings? Impudent. The Moon Empress High Priest shouted and then waved one hand. Whoosh! A ray of light went straight towards Chun Yucho. Chapter 705. The power of samsara could shatter the void. Although it was just a casual wave of the moon, sovereign high priest's hand, the power was not to be underestimated. In the void, the mystic light was like a dragon or a sword, piercing towards Chun Yucho. Hee. However, Chun Yucho's red long sleeve suddenly swung. Boom! Bang! Red robe's long sleeve dispersed the power of reincarnation. Miraculously, the two samsara powers were just right. They did not create a huge shockwave in the void. They only formed a vortex in the void and then gradually disappeared without a trace. Chun Yucho and the Moon Sovereign High Priest seemed worried. High Priest, are you going to kill me? Chun Yucho sneered. This is just a warning. The Moon Sovereign High Priest faced Chun Yucho. Although he was wearing a silver mask, there seemed to be a burning gaze coming out of his eyes. Chun Yucho, I have never done anything to you because of my relationship with you. Do you think I'm afraid of you? Don't be fooled by your stage 7 rebirth realm cultivation. I can still make you die in the Moon Palace. Hee. Chun Yucho's laughter was ear-piercing. Of course I believe you. High Priest, you can call a puppet moon sovereign and fool the people of the Demon Moon. Is there anything you can't do? Chun Yucho, the Moon Sovereign High Priest's voice turned cold and deep again. I'm warning you again. You can either leave immediately and return to your Fire Cloud Palace to live out your days in peace. Or if you say another word to mislead the public, I will kill you today in the name of the Moon Empress High Priest. Fire Cloud Palace? Live peacefully? Ha ha. Chun Yucho could not help but laugh. However, his shrill laughter was filled with an indescribable sadness. Moon Sovereign High Priest? Hee. Chun Yucho's body was trembling, but it was unknown if it was because of laughter or anger. Chime, do you really think you are the Moon Sovereign High Priest? Why do you have to use its name? I, a clown, am cleaner than you. Chun Yucho pointed at the Moon Sovereign High Priest, his eyes shooting out 2 beams of cold light. Chun Yucho, you are courting death. The Moon Sovereign High Priest could no longer control his emotions and was instantly enraged. He understood that this ritual could no longer be completed. Collect the coffin. Get into formation. The Moon Empress High Priestess shouted. Bang! When he looked again, the 4 silver-robed cultivators suddenly stood up. At the same time, the lid of the black coffin also emitted a mysterious light. The black cloth covering the black-robed youth hovering in the air was also quickly retracting. However, they were not entwined in layers. Instead, they appeared somewhat messy. The silver-robed cultivator was fast, but Chun Yucho was even faster. Leave the puppet behind. Chun Yucho's figure moved. In an instant, an extreme power erupted from him. Bang! He made a grabbing motion with one hand and headed straight for the black coffin, or rather, straight for the black-clothed youth. The 7th layer of Rebirth Realm. Chun Yucho's aura was more than enough to render the 4 first-era sempiternal realm experts powerless. Thump! The 4 silver-robed cultivators instantly fell to their knees. At that moment, as they carried the coffin, it felt like an endless mountain was pressing down on their shoulders. Chun Yucho's pressure pressed down on the black coffin. Bang! Moreover, the lid of the coffin was closed. The black-robed youth was like a wandering zombie, standing on top of the black coffin, but he could not enter it. The black cloth fluttered in the air. The black-clothed youth closed his eyes and did not move. Boom! At this moment, the Moon High Priest also moved. He flew up and headed straight for Chun Yucho. Because he knew that in the entire Moon Palace, he was the only one who could be a match for Chun Yucho. The others were not qualified to fight against Chun Yucho. Level 7 Rebirth Realm. That was the pinnacle of the entire Demon Moon world, unless the Moon Monarch came back to life. Now, in the Demon Moon world, If there was one person that the Moon High Priest was afraid of, it would be this neither human nor ghost, neither male nor female Chun Yu-cho. In fact, Chun Yu-cho had always been a thorn in his heart. However, he did not expect Chun Yu-cho to suddenly appear today. After all, Chun Yu-cho had not stepped into the Moon Palace for tens of thousands of years. However, this time, he did not come with good intentions. If he did not handle this well, the Moon High Priest knew what it meant. Boom! Crack! The Moon High Priest blocked Chun Yu-cho's power. At the same time, he formed a seal with both hands. Looking again, the black-robed and white-robed cultivators in the plaza all started moving. The lanterns in their hands all emitted a blinding light. It was different from the feeling just now. The light array in the middle of the plaza also started to burn. The word desolate started to burn. At this moment, the entire plaza was brightly lit. That way, the hall looked even more dark and gloomy. The array of the Moon Palace had started. The Moon High Priest floated in the air. Chun Yu-cho, don't forget that this is the Moon Palace. I am the ruler here. Hee. Chun Yu-cho laughed weirdly. Chime, since I, Chun Yu-cho, am here today, I am prepared for everything. Today, I will take off your mask and let all the cultivators of the Demon Moon know your true colors. I don't mind dying. Sizzle. Chun Yu-cho didn't seem to want to talk anymore. He directly stuck out a finger. The tip of his finger was surrounded by red light, and a line of blood flew towards the Moon High Priest. That move looked simple. However, the Moon High Priest knew how powerful it was. Line of life and death in the mortal world. Yi Wuhui couldn't help but say. You know that spell? Sumo asked. Yes. Yi Wuhui said. The Patriarch once said that there is a special spell in the Dead Soul Star area. Once the red line is used, as long as you touch it, you will die. However, it has been lost for a long time. I think the spell that Chun Yu-cho is using is similar to this spell. At this moment, the Moon High Priest didn't dare to face it head-on. With a wave of his hand, he took out an ancient mirror. The ancient mirror looked rather ancient and dull. Sizzle. However, Chun Yu-cho's line of life and death hit the ancient mirror. Whoosh! The ancient mirror instantly glowed brightly, and then it actually reflected Chun Yu-cho's technique back. A red line flew towards Chun Yu-cho. Hee. Chun Yu-cho laughed weirdly. Chime, you can only rely on your magic treasure. However, how can my spell hurt me? As he spoke, Chun Yu-cho reached out with his palm, facing outward. Sizzle. The line of life and death in the mortal world fell into his palm and disappeared without a trace. Chun Yu-cho is so powerful. Yi Wuhui couldn't help but say, Sumo, who do you think will win? It's hard to say. Sumo said, in terms of realms, Chun Yu-cho has the absolute advantage. However, I think the Moon High Priest must have something to rely on since he dares to fight above his realm. Let's just watch from the sidelines. Maybe we can benefit from it. Yi Wuhui smiled. That's right. Hearing this, Su Mo nodded, but then let out a long sigh. However, the cause and effect of this must be quite complicated. The story of the Demon Moon world must not be simple. The Demon Moon world was indeed a complicated place. Chapter 706. Chime. Chun Yu-cho shouted coldly, and then with a twist of his hand, the red line that entered his palm directly transformed into a red sword. That sword glowed red like blood, cold and threatening. Blood Moon Sword. The Moon High Priestess seemed to shake, because that sword used to be the sacred sword of the Demon Moon Dynasty. It had always been in Chun Yu-cho's hands, but Chun Yu-cho rarely used it. Ha. Chun Yu-cho held the sword and smiled at the Moon High Priestess. Chime, the Blood Moon drinks blood. The Moon Monarch is reborn. Today it's time for this puppet of yours to die. Whoosh, chi. Chun Yu-cho's red robe moved, and the Blood Moon sword his hand shone. Man and sword became one, like a red cloud, charging at the black-robed youth on the black coffin. None of the cultivators present seemed to have expected this. Chun Yu-cho kept saying that the black-robed youth was the Moon Monarch's puppet, but in the hearts of the Demon Moon cultivators, the black-robed youth was the Moon Monarch. but he didn't wake up. Chun Yu-cho dared to attack the Moon Monarch? This was something they didn't dare to imagine. Whoosh! The moment Chun Yu-cho attacked the black-robed youth, the mother and son and the Peak Sea extermination cultivator on the black platform moved. They were supposed to leave the Moon Palace and return to Moon Capital. They were supposed to be the Moon Monarch's secret agents and live in the Demon Moon world. But Chun Yu-cho's appearance ruined the ceremony. If they couldn't leave the Moon Palace in 15 minutes, they would be destroyed. So, they hated Chun Yu-cho the most. There was basically no hope of reincarnation. So, the moment Chun Yu-cho attacked the black-robed youth, they pounced at him together. At that moment, they were like 3 stray dogs. Saint? What a joke. Chun Yu-cho's eyes shot out cold light as he swung the Blood Moon sword. Whoosh! The light of the sacred sword was unstoppable. Looking again, the sword light directly cut the mother and son and the perfected sea annihilation realm cultivator into 2. They didn't even have a chance to groan before they turned into a mist of blood and dissipated. Before Chun Yu-cho, they weren't even worth mentioning. In the Moon Palace, only the High Priestess could fight Chun Yu-cho. The rest simply couldn't do it. Even though the 4 Silver Robe cultivators were all-life, sempiternal realm cultivators, they were still suppressed by Chun Yu-cho's oppressive might, and they were forced to kneel on the ground. They didn't even have the strength to resist. The black coffin was as heavy as Mount Tai. Light change. At this moment, the Moon Empress High Priestess separated her hands. Hu la la. Hu. Instantly, the lanterns in the hands of the black-robed and white-robed cultivators flew up. They rapidly transformed in the void and surrounded the black-robed youth. At the same time, the Desolation character light array on the plaza once again lit up with flames that were several dozen feet high. The lantern formation tightly protected the black-clothed youth. Protect the Moon Empress. The Moon Empress High Priest roared. At the same time, he raised a hand. There was already a heavenly halberd in his hand. The halberd was 3 zhang long and had a shocking aura. It was also a divine artifact of the Devil Moon Empire. Kill. The Moon Empress High Priestess understood that she had to fight to the death today. Unless he killed Chun Yu-cho, there was no turning back. The heavenly halberd was like a dragon coming out of the sea. The reincarnation chi instantly filled the sky. Chun Yu-cho, in today's battle, either you die or I die. If you want to kill the Moon Empress, you have to step over my dead body. Unfortunately, I'm afraid you can't do that. Demon Moon cut. As she spoke, the Moon Emperor's High Priest directly threw the heavenly halberd into the void. At that moment, it was like a spear or a knife. Buzz, buzz, buzz. At this time, the Black Palace began to emit dazzling black light. All the black light was concentrated on the sharp edge of the halberd. At the same time, the vast spiritual chi from the Black Palace was also poured into the High Priest's body. Level 5, Reincarnation Realm. Level 6, Reincarnation Realm. Level 7, Reincarnation Realm. In just a moment, the Moon Emperor's High Priest's realm directly climbed to Level 7 Reincarnation Realm. This spell is a bit similar to my sister's. Yi Wu-hui couldn't help but say. Haha. Sumo smiled. Forcibly increasing one's cultivation with a spell can't last long, and it will hurt one's body. It seems that the Moon Emperor's High Priest is putting all his eggs in one basket. It's a pity that the Supreme Ghost Face was stolen by that little girl, Wang Shui. Otherwise, it would be a top-notch magic treasure that can instantly increase one's realm. If it's a critical moment, I can also use it. It seems that Chun Yu-cho is in danger, right? Yi Wu-hui said again. Not necessarily, Sumo said. From their conversation, it seems that they're old acquaintances and they are very familiar with each other. Chun Yu-cho must know something about the Moon Emperor's High Priest. Since he dares to come alone, he must have some confidence. Then when do we make our move? Yi Wu-hui said. Haha, see, we are not in a hurry, so we don't have to make our move. Sumo smiled. Level 7 Reincarnation Realm? Chun Yu-cho held the Blood Moon sword and smiled. He continued to speak in his high-pitched voice. Chi Mei, is this your limit? You can't completely control the power of the Moon Emperor's palace, can you? If so, you will die today. Whoosh! Chun Yu Chao's red robe fluttered again. Like a red bolt of lightning, the sword in his hand dashed toward the Moon Empress High Priest. This time, the Moon Empress High Priest didn't dodge. Roar! The sky halberd hacked down with tremendous force. Boom! Crack! The airflow of the two magic weapons collided when they were dozens of feet away from each other. With a loud bang, they were both bounced back. However, to Sumo and Yi Wuhui's surprise, such a collision didn't cause any turbulent waves. Instead, all the airflow disappeared after a flash. This wasn't the first time. Just now, when Chun Yu Cho appeared, he exchanged a blow with the Moon Empress High Priest. However, they didn't use weapons. That was the result just now. Sumo, this ward is very special, Yi Wuhui said. Yes. Sumo also realized this problem. It seems to be able to absorb some of the power here, so that the ward will never break. Sizzle. Sizzle. Chun Yu Chao's swordsmanship was extremely weird. The Blood Moon sword in his hand was like a red spiritual snake. After one strike, he didn't fight against the Moon Empress High Priest anymore. The Moon Empress High Priest waved his sky halberd. He had completely protected himself in the center of the square. At this moment, he wasn't worried about himself, but the black-robed young man on the black coffin. At this moment, both of them were in the 7th level of samsara. However, in a sense, neither of them used their full strength. Although they were familiar with each other, they hadn't seen each other for tens of thousands of years. No one was sure if the other had more powerful skills, especially the Moon Empress High Priest. As Sumo said, if Chun Yu Cho dared to come, he must have something to rely on. Therefore, the Moon Empress High Priest wouldn't use his trump card until the last moment. In the Moon Imperial Palace, Chun Yu Cho didn't dare to be too aggressive. Just like this, the two of them exchanged more than 10 strikes, and they were basically equal. At this moment, the black-robed young man on the black coffin suddenly frowned. Moon Empress. The Moon Empress High Priest sensed it immediately. Chun Yu Chao's expression changed. Chapter 707. Samsara of Yachizo has no more updates today. Currently typing, please wait a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest update. Chapter 708. In the Demon Moon Royal Palace, no one expected that the black-robed young man would suddenly frown. Most cultivators didn't even notice that subtle movement. But Chun Yu Cho and the High Priest both sensed it. Both of them paused at the same time. Sumo, the black-robed young man, seems to be waking up. Yi Wuhui reminded her. Yes. Sumo nodded. She also noticed the black-robed young man's movement. Although it was just a frown, it was unusual when it happened to the young man. Roar, roar. At this moment, Chun Yu Cho and the Moon High Priest stepped back at the same time and stopped fighting. Their eyes fell on the black-robed young man. Suddenly, endless chanting came from the Black Palace. It was sudden and strange. At this moment, the palace was like a huge echo wall, because the Moon High Priest knew that he didn't arrange anyone to chant in the Black Palace. But the chanting was like a tide. It sounded like the cultivators on the square were chanting again. Chun Yu Cho and the Moon High Priest both looked at the Black Palace. That was the core of the Demon Moon Royal Palace, which used to be the Moon Palace. The Moon Empress of the Demon Moon world used to be there. Just now, the black coffin was carried out from the Black Palace. Divine resonance. Chun Yu Cho and the Moon High Priest both understood what the chanting meant. The Moon Empress was about to wake up. That was the prelude to the Moon Empress's awakening. But at this moment, both Chun Yu Cho and the Moon High Priest were shocked. In Chun Yu Chao's eyes, the black-robed young man wasn't the Moon Empress at all, but a puppet of the Moon High Priest. How could that young man attract the divine resonance? And in the Moon High Priest's eyes, the Moon Empress's awakening was unreasonable. He had been sleeping. The power that the Moon Empress absorbed was far from enough. Who gave him the power to be reborn? Could it be that the legend was true? At this moment, the Moon High Priest saw the faint black aura between the black-robed young man's eyebrows and was a bit worried. That wasn't the aura of the Demon Moon. Although Chun Yu Cho and the Moon Empress High Priestess both chose to stop fighting, Their thoughts were completely different. However, relatively speaking, the Moon Empress High Priestess hoped that the black-robed young man would wake up. Because wasn't that what he had been hoping for tens of thousands of years? Every drop of blood and every soul on the pilgrimage had been sacrificed for the Moon Empress. Everything that the High Priest had done was for this day. Moon Empress, please wake up. The Moon Empress High Priestess stepped back and knelt on the ground. This was the first time he had performed such a formal greeting. Kumi roar. At the same time, the sound of chanting came from his throat. As he chanted, the other cultivators also chanted in unison. The desolate character lantern formation had a flame that was dozens of feet tall. The green and red lanterns danced in the air. At that moment, it was like a banquet had reached its climax. The stars surrounded the moon, waiting for the black-clothed youth to wake up. Chun Yu Chao's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, a serious expression appeared on his face. That expression was a huge contrast to Chun Yu Chao's appearance. However, his grip on the blood moon's sword tightened, and even his fingers turned a little white. For tens of thousands of years, he had always believed that the real Moon Empress was long gone. Everything in the Demon Moon Palace was fake. They couldn't represent the real royal family of the Demon Moon. At this moment, the aura of the black-clothed youth was rising. He had really turned from a corpse to a living being. In the dark, Sumo's demon eyes were fully opened, and black light was faintly flowing in his eyes. Sumo could see that the gray aura that had been dormant in the black-clothed youth's body was growing. From dry to thin, from thin to surging. Hua! Hua! At that moment, Sumo even felt that she could hear the tide of spiritual power in the black-clothed youth's body. That power was extremely strong. He was really waking up. The black fog between the black-clothed youth's eyebrows was getting thicker, and at the same time, Chun Yu Chao's eyes were getting colder and colder. Whoosh! La la! Suddenly, the black cloth on the black-clothed youth's body scattered. At that moment, it was like a peacock spreading its tail or a rock spreading its wings. An inexplicable power was surging in the void. A hidden demonic aura. Yi Wu Hue said in surprise. As everything happened, Chun Yu Chao's eyebrows were already raised. His judgment was right. The black-clothed youth was not a moon sovereign, but a hidden demonic beast. The legend was true. The moon sovereign being a demonic beast was absurd. Therefore, Chun Yu Chao made his move again. And this time, he directly threw the blood moon's sword into the void, and then quickly made a seal with both hands. His seal was so fast that it was almost impossible to see it clearly. Whoosh! From behind Chun Yu Chao's back, another Chun Yu Chao walked out. The same long robe, the same tall hat, the same makeup, the same face. But he was wearing a long black robe, red and black, divided into two. That was Chun Yu Chao's peerless secret skill. Among the people present, only the Moon Empress High Priestess knew that he had this ability. Chun Yu Chao, the Moon Sovereign High Priest, couldn't help but shout. He knew that Chun Yu Chao was going to stake everything on one throw. However, Chun Yu Chao didn't give him any chance to stop. Boom! His secret skill was complete. The black-clothed Chun Yu Chao made a seal with both hands. His body emitted an incomparable black light. That light shot up into the sky, as if wanting to rush out of this moon palace world. The power of the Rebirth Realms Stage 7 completely exploded. At that moment, the black-clothed Chun Yu Chao was like a black sun. He wanted to disperse all the light and heat, not for the growth of all living things, but for the destruction of all things. It was a sure kill technique. Ha ha! Kiki, the red-clothed Chun Yu Chao, also let out a strange laugh. The red light on his body also appeared, but it wasn't as powerful as the black-clothed Chun Yu Chao. Red and black, life and death. The two Chun Yu Chaos grinned, as if mocking all living things. Whoosh! Bang, bang. The green and red lanterns in the center of the plaza already started to break, turning into smoke. In fact, everything happened in a split second. Everything happened in a flash. Bang, bang. Puff, puff. The black-clothed Divine Burial Realm cultivators at the outermost edge of the plaza already couldn't withstand the pressure and killing intent. They became the first wave of people to be killed by Chun Yu-cho. Black like butterflies, blood and flesh turned into mist. That scene was basically a massacre. Hee-hee, Kakik. The two Chun Yu-chows were like a pair of clown demons. They joined hands to create a bloody feast. Everything happened too fast. Their power couldn't be stopped. At this moment, they each reached out a hand. Two deathly pale hands instantly clasped together. Red and black instantly merged together. The entire plaza, except for the area of 3 zhang around the black-clothed youngster and the moon's sovereign high priest, was almost covered, enduring for 10,000 years just to kill the demon. Moon Sovereign's holy light shines for 10,000 years. The two Chun Yu-chows shouted with a sharp and piercing voice. That was their belief. Boom! Crack! The black and red light instantly exploded, and then an endless mushroom cloud rose into the air. Chapter 709. Chun Yu-cho's technique was earth-shattering. It was not a self-detonation technique, but it was almost as powerful as a self-detonation. It was several times his own strength. The moment the black and red light shot into the sky, the two Chun Yu-cho merged into one. He turned into a shadow and retreated. However, Sumo saw that Chun Yu-cho's face was pale. Boom! Hua! The immortal power of a 7th-tier rebirth realm cultivator exploded. At that moment, the power here exceeded the limit of the Moon Palace's array. They were not completely absorbed by the array. Instead, they exploded and turned into clouds that shot into the sky. At the same time, almost all the cultivators on the plaza were killed. The white-robed world destruction cultivators turned into ashes. The red-robed sea destruction cultivators lost their souls. The lanterns and artifacts in their hands turned into ashes. This was something that none of the Demon Moon cultivators had expected. Chun Yu-cho actually used such a tyrannical technique in the Moon Palace. It was truly destructive. The spiritual power was still raging like a storm. The 4-1-era Immortal Realm cultivators were not killed because of the Black Coffin and the Black-robed youth. However, they were kneeling on the ground and vomiting blood. At that moment, the entire Moon Palace was twisting. Sumo, we can't hold on here any longer, Yi Wuhui said. It's okay, Sumo said calmly. Perhaps we will show up soon. As long as you are in my sea of consciousness, you'll be safe. Boom, boom, the mushroom cloud rose. Finally, it reached the critical point of the Moon Palace's array. Looking again, the void was shaking and the galaxy was trembling. Then there was the sound of something shattering. It was like a glass world being shattered. Crack, crack. The aura of the moon capital rushed toward them. Something happened to the palace. What is that sound? Such power. Mushroom cloud. Spread out. Once the array was broken, all the power rushed out like a flood. Outside the Demon Moon Palace, many Demon Moon cultivators sensed the abnormality of the Moon Palace. Unfortunately, the cultivators outside the Demon Moon Palace were turned into blood mist before they could figure out what was going on. At that moment, the entire Luna capital fell into panic. The reason for that was because the way they saw it, the Black Moon Tower was collapsing and the entire Moon Imperial Palace was being destroyed. The night was hazy, and the 8 stars hung high in the sky. Tonight, the appearance of the Bloodbat was seen as a bad omen. Now, the collapse of the Demon Moon Imperial Palace could be considered a sign. Actually, the Bloodbat just now was just Chun Yu-cho's fake aura. However, the cultivators in the Demon Moon Imperial Palace knew that the illusion of the Moon Palace had dissipated. At this time, the Moon Empress High Priestess had already flown up. The 2 enchanting female cultivators behind him glanced at each other before retreating into the Black Hall. The Great Hall actually vibrated under Chun Yu-cho's explosive power. It had to be said that Chun Yu-cho's Dao technique was too domineering. In the storm, the Moon Empress Great Priestess really wanted to turn the tide, but she didn't have the strength. After all, he was only at the 5th rebirth realm. At this moment, the Moon Palace collapsed, and the Black Temple shook. The power he borrowed earlier had completely disappeared. Squeak, clang, and at this moment, The black tower that stood behind the black palace suddenly emitted a sound that was neither a bird nor a beast. At the same time, a ball of red light rose from the black tower. Bloodbath. That was a real bloodbath. At this moment, the Moon Imperial Palace was completely exposed in the Moon Capital. The cyclone of the seventh rebirth realm was still spreading. Chun Yu-Cho formed a seal with his hands and stood in the void. The Blood Moon sword floated above his head. The sword light hung down and protected his body, ensuring that he would not be injured. However, Chun Yu-Chao's face was as pale as paper. Purple-black blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. He breathed heavily, and his eyes were gloomy. However, he still stared at the black-robed young man. At this moment, Chun Yu-Cho didn't look like a clown, but a hero at the end of his road. In his eyes, there was still obsession and unwillingness. Ahem. Haha. Chun Yu-Cho looked at the Moon Capital and sneered. Demon Moon cultivators, look at the Moon Imperial Palace now. Look at the current Moon Empress. He's a demon. Ha ha ha. Ha. Black-purple blood flowed from the corner of Chun Yu-Chao's mouth. The Demon Moon Empress is a demon? How ridiculous! Chun Yu-Chao's eyes were filled with endless sorrow. Whoosh, whoosh. At this moment, the image of a blood bat appeared on the top of the black tower. A giant bat with a wingspan of dozens of feet floated in the night sky like a red cloud. Qingyu, Qingshuang. The Moon High Priestess's voice changed as she looked at the black hall, because there was indeed a bloodbath sealed in the Black Moon Tower. At this moment, someone must have undone the seal. It could only be the two enchanting female cultivators who escaped into the Black Hall, Qingyu and Qingshuang. They were the two most favored female cultivators of the Moon High Priestess. However, at this critical moment, they released the bloodbath. What are they trying to do? Ha ha! Chun Yu-Cho glanced at the panicking Moon Capital and the bloodbath on the Black Tower. He couldn't help but say to the Moon High Priestess, Demon, haha. If so, why don't you destroy the Demon Moon world? Everything was clean and tidy. Then, you and I will have the face to meet the previous Moon Empresses. Ha ha ha. Chun Yu-Cho you? The Moon High Priestess didn't have time to talk nonsense with Chun Yu-Cho. Today, if Chun Yu-Cho hadn't shown up, everything wouldn't have been so bad. Seal. The Moon High Priestess made a seal with both hands. Her spell was directly used on the Black Tower. Between Chun Yu-Chao's spell and the bloodbaths, the Moon High Priestess obviously cared more about the latter. That bloodbath absolutely could not be released. Otherwise, the people would be in great danger. Whoosh! The Moon High Priestess made a seal in front of her chest. She seemed to have used all her strength. Her body glowed with a strange brilliance. It was completely different from before. Bang! His long hair flew in the air, and the mask on his face burst open. Behind the mask, there was no human face at all. That was because his facial features were almost all incomplete. He had no eyebrows, empty eye sockets, collapsed nose, and a cracked mouth. His appearance was too horrible to look at. Ah! Yi Wuhui couldn't help but exclaim. She had never seen a cultivator like this. Even if some cultivators were seriously injured, with their magic power, they would not show themselves with such an appearance. How could a cultivator in the 5th level of the reincarnation realm look like this? Demon. Chun Yu-Cho looked at the Moon High Priestess with a complicated expression, because he already knew what the Moon High Priestess looked like. Seal. The Moon High Priestess didn't care about showing her face. She opened her mouth and spat out a stream of soul blood. The soul blood turned into a long rainbow and went straight to the Black Moon Tower. Boom! The Black Moon Tower shook violently. The image of the bloodbath on the top of the tower dimmed. Demon, why bother? At that moment, Chun Yu-Cho shook his head and sighed. He didn't even know whether he was right or wrong. Everything was irreversible. Boom! The image of the bloodbath lit up again. The Black Moon Tower shook again. Seal. The Moon High Priestess made another seal and spat out another stream of soul blood. However, nothing could stop it. The scream of the bloodbath reached the sky. It echoed across the entire Moon Royal Planet. At this moment, the young man in black suddenly opened his eyes and sneered. Chapter 710. That was not the gaze of a young man. because that gaze was too cold and full of vicissitudes. In his gaze, there seemed to be the traces of time and the reflection of time. To some extent, the eyes of the young man in black were the same as when Sumo first awakened. But his gaze was even colder. No one could be sure what kind of existence the young man in black was. The young man in black, glanced at everything in front of him, and an unfathomable sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. Then he raised his head and looked at the 8 stars in the night sky. Then he withdrew his gaze and slowly raised his hands. "Suppress," he lightly shouted. Then one of his hands slowly pressed down toward the tower of the Black Moon. Boom! In the night sky, an unparalleled white light directly fell from one of the stars. That white light was like an invincible light beam from a distant star. Boom! The tower of the Black Moon was directly hit. The bloodbath that was about to appear again was directly smashed. At the same time, the entire Black Tower was hit several feet shorter. An entire floor of the Black Tower was smashed into the ground. The power of the stars. This young man in black could actually control the stars of the Demon Moon world. "Sumo, is he Xiao Huang?" Yi Wuhui asked anxiously. "I can't be sure," Sumo said in a low voice. His eyes were fixed on the Huang character between the young man's eyebrows. "Moon Empress. The Moon Empress is here. Moon Empress." At this moment, the countless terrified cultivators and mortals in Moon Capital had almost all seen the scene just now. Therefore, the young man in black became their life-saving straw. Moreover, the young man had displayed unparalleled strength just now. According to the legend of the Demon Moon, all the stars of the Demon Moon world were under the control of the Moon Empress. The one who could control the 9 stars of the Demon Moon must be the Moon Empress. That could be said to be ironclad proof. Therefore, countless cultivators and people in Moon Capital instantly knelt down. Those who were already on the pilgrimage prostrated themselves on the ground and kowtowed devoutly. At this moment, they did not want to run for their lives. Because it was already too late. They might as well put their hopes on the Moon Empress. Moon Empress? Chun Yu-Cho saw this, his brows furrowed, his expression changing. He had indeed seen the black-robed youth control the power of the demonic moon stars with his own eyes, but he had also deeply felt the endless demonic aura. "Moon Empress." Chi-Mei turned her head. He had no eyes, but at that moment, he seemed to be staring blankly at the black-clothed youth. The sudden awakening of the Moon Empress and her great power seemed to have shocked him. "Greetings, Moon Empress." Chi-Mei knelt on the ground. At the same time, with a thought, another mask appeared on his face. It seemed that his appearance was a blasphemy to the Moon Empress. "Hee. Chi-Mei, you've worked hard." The black-robed youth laughed coldly. Then he turned to Chun Yu-Cho. "Ah, Cho, you actually wanted to kill me previously?" Chun Yu-Cho couldn't help but be dumbstruck, because only the previous Moon Empress would call him Ah Cho. Chun Yu-Cho was an extremely special existence in the Devil Moon world. In the Devil Moon world, only Moon Monarch and Chi-Mei knew that he was called this. Therefore, at this moment, Chun Yu-Cho's body shook as though he was struck by lightning. The black-robed youth in front of him, was he really the reincarnation of the Moon Empress? But how could the Moon Empress be a demon? "Ah Cho, you disappoint me." The black-robed youth's lips curled into an evil smile. Then he raised his other hand slightly. In the night sky, another star started to move under his hand gesture. "Those who are not loyal to me will die. Those who do not believe in me, how can they live?" The black-robed youth's voice was low. The expression in his eyes was not that of a 12 or 13-year-old youth. His long hair spread out slightly. The black cloth behind him fluttered. At the same time, he opened one hand. Boom! Under the control of the black-robed youth, the power of the stars suddenly pressed down, straight towards Chun Yu-Cho. At this moment, Chun Yu-Cho was heavily injured. The Tao technique just now had a huge price. To be able to last until now, he was already at the end of his tether. He definitely could not withstand the power of one star. The black-robed youth wanted to kill Chun Yu-Cho. Chun Yu-Cho's body quickly retreated. Right now, his speed was already extremely slow. At the same time, he took out the Blood Moon sword. That was Chun Yu Chao's last method of resistance, because the Ling power in his body was completely used up. Boom! Crack! The power of the stars hit the Blood Moon Sword. Buzz! Buzz! On the Blood Moon Sword, red light diffused like a meteor shower. The power of the stars, although did not break the Blood Moon Sword, it struck it down. In an instant, the Blood Moon Sword dimmed. It had already lost its defensive power, and the power of the stars did not decrease. Chun Yu Chao's face was already twisted. His blood-red hat was knocked off his head. His long hair spread out like a demon. Unfortunately, he had no more fighting power. Wah! Wah! Under the power of the stars, he was already vomiting blood. Bang! Right above Chun Yu Chao's head, a black figure broke apart. That was his black-robed doppelganger from before. Chun Yu Chao would definitely die. However, at the last moment, the power of the stars stopped in the air. Ah Cho, in the name of the Moon Empress, I grant you death. The black-robed youth's expression was cold, almost without any emotion. Since you are an elder of the Demon Moon, do you have anything else to say? At that moment, he really was a god that controlled life and death. Hee. Chun Yu Chao touched the blood at the corner of his mouth. The Moon Empress, and the leader of the Demon Moon. My power is strong, but my heart is merciful. How can I be a demon? Chun Yu Chao, even if I die today, I will have no regrets. Then you shall die. The black-robed youth's eyes flashed with red light. Then he clenched his fist. The power of the stars that was originally hovering above Chun Yu Chao's head suddenly fell down. Boom! Chun Yu Chao had closed his eyes, waiting for death. However, a roar entered his ears. At the same time, an extremely strong and gentle power instantly wrapped around him. Chun Yu Chao hurriedly opened his eyes. He looked again and saw a black-robed cultivator standing in front of him, stepping on a small black boat. And above his head, there was a ball of green light. The green light transformed into a lotus flower and blocked the power of the stars. At this moment, not only Chun Yu Chao was shocked, but also the Moon High Priest, Chi Mei, and the black-robed youth. Who are you? Chi Mei was the first to ask. Hee. Sumo laughed coldly. Who am I? Perhaps it is not important who I am, but I want to know who he is. As he spoke, Sumo pointed at the black-robed youth. Impudent! Chi Mei shouted. Who are you? The black-robed youth looked at Sumo and said, Why do you want to save him? This is the matter of my Demon Moon world. Sir, please go back to where you came from. I can ignore the matter of the Demon Moon, but you must give me an explanation. However, you have to give me an explanation for this. With that, Sumo waved his hand and wrote a huge barren character in the air. The desolate character was majestic, shining brightly. At the same time, an extremely strange aura instantly spread throughout the entire Moon Imperial Palace. It was the aura of the Great Desolate. The black-robed youth's expression changed. The desolate character between his eyebrows jumped. It was as if some kind of power was struggling in the black-robed youth's body. Chi Mei, kill him, the black-robed youth said coldly. Chapter 711. Kill him. The black-robed young man's order was cold and decisive. It was an almost instinctive order. When Sumo used the word desolation, the black-robed young man gave the order. There was no delay. Whoosh! Chi Mei, the Moon Empress High Priestess, suddenly flew up. The sky halberd in her hand chopped down. The power of that move was not small. The power of the 5th level of the Rebirth Realm could, in theory, fight against Sumo. However, Sumo was not an ordinary cultivator. His spell techniques and divine weapon were definitely not something an ordinary cultivator could compare to. Just now, the green lotus light above his head was transformed by the lotus vine. At this moment, he thought of something. The lotus vine returned to its original appearance and directly stood on top of his head. Boom! Chi Mei's sky halberd hit the lotus vine and was directly lifted dozens of feet high. The spiritual light was violent, and the immortal aura was crazy. How could the battle between two Rebirth Realm cultivators be ordinary? At this time, The boundary of the Demon Moon Palace had already disappeared. The remaining power of their battle instantly scattered to the periphery, and Moon Capital suffered the most. Just now, the power of Chun Yucho's self-explosion was just stopped by the black-robed young man. Now, the second wave of rebirth realm power began to sweep everything. Boom! Boom! Smoke and dust covered the sky and the sun. Many buildings in Moon Capital collapsed in an instant. Cultivators above the breaking realm could barely escape, but cultivators below the breaking realm were almost all buried in the city. It was a disaster. No matter the result of this battle, Moon Capital might be destroyed, because it could not withstand a battle of rebirth realm cultivators. Chi Mei stood in the void, holding the halberd upside down. Sumo stood on the boat, holding the lotus vine. They seemed to be a little hesitant. They did not want the people to be plunged into misery and suffering. If a battle of rebirth realm cultivators really started, not to mention Moon Capital, even the Moon Empress planet might be destroyed. There was no boundary here. The black-robed young man still stood on the black coffin, the corner of his mouth twitching coldly. He did not make a move, but the word desolation between his eyebrows was faintly jumping. He looked at everything coldly. Chi Mei, do not hesitate. I will save the people of Moon Empress. Kill him at all costs. The black-clothed youth ordered once more. At the same time, he raised his hands again. In the night sky, for more stars began to rotate according to his hand gesture. Needless to say, the strength of the black-clothed youth was extremely powerful. The ability to control the stars was not a simple matter of one's realm, but a kind of talent. It was innate and had nothing to do with realms. Whoosh, whoosh, 4 streaks of light shot down from the vast void. They landed in 4 different directions of Moon Capital. Green, red, purple, and white. 4 colors of brilliance instantly spread out. Then, they connected with each other to form a square formation. It was an absolutely extravagant barrier. It had surrounded the entire Moon King city. The black-robed youth leaped up, bringing the black coffin with him. He floated in the void, seemingly to prevent Sumo from escaping. However, his actions were tantamount to tacitly admitting that the Moon Capital was the battlefield. Everything here would definitely be destroyed. At the same time, as he rose into the sky, thousands of cultivators in the entire Moonlight Capital followed suit. On the surface, their realms were not unified, and there were even a few mortals among them. However, they all exuded a strange aura, and there was even some kind of resonance in them. They were connected to each other, but they also stood around the black-clothed youth like stars on a chessboard. At that moment, they were like the stars standing in the world of the black-clothed youth. They were guarding him. Moon Empress messengers? Yiwu Hue said, Sumo, this should be the so-called Moon Empress messengers, just like the mother and son and the one at the peak of the realm of the sea extermination realm. They must have been successful pilgrims in the past. It seems that they have been hiding for a long time. Sumo said, and they're just pilgrims in Moon King City. There are countless cultivators like them in the entire Moon King planet, and even in the world of the Demon Moon. How generous! Yiwu Hue sneered. In fact, if the Moon Empress is just and honorable, it seems that there is no need to do this. It is normal for the 9 stars to come and all the people to congratulate them. Why do they have to use such a method to control their people? Sumo and Yiwu Hue talked for a while. At that moment, Chi Mei's halberd attacked again. The Moon Empress had given the order, and she had set up the realms. Therefore, Chi Mei no longer had any misgivings this time around. His halberd could sweep away thousands of enemies. He had already put everything in the Moon Capital out of his mind. Killing Sumo was his first task, because it was the Moon Empress order. He, Chi Mei, had waited for tens of thousands of years for the Moon Empress to wake up, hadn't he? Today, his wish was fulfilled. So what if he died? No matter who the cultivator in front of him was, he would kill him if he could. Even if he couldn't, he would kill him. Whoosh! The power of Chi Mei's halberd instantly doubled. At the same time, a mysterious light suddenly lit up between his eyebrows. It was like the heavenly eye. A beam of light illuminated the world. Fellow Taoist, be careful. That is the eye of the demon moon. It can make rebirth state cultivators fall into an illusion. Chun Yu Cho, who was behind Sumo, warned. Illusion? Sumo's heart skipped a beat. He swung the immortal vine in his hand, shaking off Chi Mei's halberd. However, Chi Mei's eye of the demon moon had already shone on Sumo's body. At that moment, Sumo's demon eye dimmed. A rebirth state illusion still had some effect on Sumo. Ha ha ha! Suddenly, Sumo heard the laughter of a child. He was extremely familiar with that laughter. At the same time, he saw an ancient village. At the entrance of the ancient village, there was a huge plum tree. Under the plum tree, an 11 or 12-year-old child was playing. That child looked like he was carved out of jade and was extremely beautiful. However, he was dressed in black. His clothes were exactly the same as the clothes of the young man in black. At that moment, Sumo's heart shook. Huang-o. The young man under the plum tree looked up at Sumo. Father. When the young man saw Sumo, his eyes were filled with surprise, and he stretched out his hands to pounce on Sumo. Huang. At that moment, Sumo's heart surged with emotions, and he could not control himself. He instinctively moved forward and wanted to hug that child. At that moment, even though Sumo had a trace of hesitation in his heart, he could not control himself. Father and son, blood was thicker than water. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. The road was not long, but it was very slow. Sumo could already feel the aura on Huang's body. However, at this moment, Yi Wu Hui's voice suddenly rang out. That voice was like spring thunder, a sharp warning. Sumo, wake up. That's an illusion. Yi Wu Hui shouted. Roar. Sumo's heart shuddered. When she looked again, that young man Huang had already turned into a vicious snake. He opened his huge mouth and wanted to swallow Sumo. Hua. At the moment of life and death, Sumo instinctively retreated and then waved his hands. Countless red lights filled the sky. The blood-colored rose blocked everything. Chapter 712. The sky was full of red flowers, and the demonic boat was reversed. Chi Mei's illusion shook Sumo's soul. At that moment, he did fall into an illusion. Although it was only for a moment, for a battle of the reincarnation level, a moment was the difference between life and death. Yi Wu Hui saved Sumo, because she was not attacked by the illusion. Perhaps no one would have thought that there was another divine soul hidden in Sumo's sea of consciousness. In the illusion, Sumo saw Xiao Huang rushing towards him, but in fact, it was the halberd in Chi Mei's hand that was stabbing towards Sumo's heart. Fortunately, everything happened in an instant. Sumo's protective red flowers scattered and formed a red shield, blocking Chi Mei's halberd. Boom! The red flowers collapsed, and spiritual energy surged. What a powerful eye of the demon moon! Sumo raised his eyebrows. A murderous look flashed in his eyes. If it weren't for Yi Wu Hui, he would have been killed by Chi Mei. Chi Mei! Sumo called the Moon High Priestess' name coldly. At this moment, Sumo wanted to kill. Most of the time, if you don't kill someone, others will. You don't have much choice. She shook her hand, and the lotus vine turned into a dragon. The lotus vine in Sumo's hand expanded in the wind, turned into thousands of rays of light, and rushed towards Chi Mei. At the same time, Sumo's left hand made a seal. It was a spell from the Dun Luo Sutra. Looking again, Sumo's palm suddenly emitted a red light. That light turned into a cylindrical vortex and flew towards Chi Mei's eyebrows. Wheel arrow, Sumo shouted. At the same time, Chi Mei's halberd also shook slightly. The halberd trembled, and countless spears flew. The power of reincarnation directly met Sumo's rays of light. Chi-chi, boom! Countless forces collided with each other. Inside the enchantment, there were explosions like fireworks. However, every single firework was fatal. Chi Mei's halberd temporarily blocked Sumo's lotus vines. However, Sumo's Dao technique was like a maggot in his bones. The cylindrical vortex went straight to Chi Mei's forehead. Chi Mei formed a hand seal and used 2 spells in a row. However, none of them could stop that round of arrows. In the end, Chi Mei spat out a mouthful of soul blood from her mask. The soul blood formed a spiderweb-like shield in the air. Bang! Sumo's arrows hit the blood-colored shield. The cylindrical vortex instantly dispersed. However, to Chi Mei's surprise, a small blood-red arrow flew out from the center of the vortex. That was the essence of Sumo's Tao technique. Chi! It tore through the air and pierced through the blood shield. This was something Chi Mei hadn't expected. Moreover, they were already very close to each other. Chi Mei wanted to react, but it was already too late. Puff! The blood-red arrow nailed itself between his eyebrows. To be more precise, this arrow destroyed Chi Mei's demon moon eye. However, Chi Mei was still Chi Mei, and that round of arrows was formed from immortal power. Therefore, it couldn't pierce through Chi Mei's head. However, Sumo's killing intent had been aroused, so she naturally wouldn't let it go. At the same time that the round of arrows pierced Chi Mei's demon moon eye, he had already used another spell. Sumo stepped forward, and the demonic boat followed. He already had a black rose in his hand. It was an existence different from the blood-red rose. They were crystallized magic treasures that came from the remnant of the galaxy. Chi. Sumo held a black rose in one hand and stabbed it straight at Chi Mei's immortal heart. In the time it takes for a spark to fly off a flint, everything happened in that instant. Chi Mei had just lost his demon moon eye and was in a daze for a moment. Puff! Sumo's black roses suddenly pierced his immortal heart. None of the spectating cultivators had expected this scene. Chi Mei felt a chill in his chest, and then a burning sensation instantly spread throughout his body. His immortal heart was shattered. Chi Mei really didn't expect that he would die in the hands of a strange cultivator. Who was this rebirth-level cultivator? He didn't know. He had never seen Sumo before. He could only say that he was a variable. But at that moment, Chi Mei didn't regret it. Behind a mask, Chi Mei's mouth curved. Moon Empress was awake, so what if he died? He didn't care if Moon Empress had demonic aura or not. His request was different from Chun Yuchao's. So what if Moon Empress was a demon? As long as Moon Empress was the Moon Empress that Chi Mei thought she was, it was fine. He believed that he didn't let down all living beings. Everything he did was for the demon moon. Explode. Chi Mei used the last of her strength to yell. Fellow Taoist, retreat quickly. He's going to self-destruct. Chun Yuchao used his extremely sharp and unpleasant voice to shout. Of course, Sumo also felt it, so before Chun Yuchao shouted, she had already retreated. Just now, the power of Chun Yuchao's spell was evident. Chi Mei's self-destruct was definitely not weaker than his. Sumo's mind moved. He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to gain much today. Chi Mei was already dead, so there was no need to continue fighting. Thus, the black-robed young man still hadn't made his move. With the power he displayed, Sumo might not have a chance of winning. Moreover, this was the Moon Empress planet. The other rebirth-level cultivators in the Demon Moon world could appear at any time. Sumo had already decided to leave. One step, Sumo took the demon boat and Chun Yuchao with his magical steps. With one step, he was already out of the star boundaries set by the black-robed young man. The black-robed young man's expression changed. He didn't expect that the cultivator in front of him could get out of his boundary so easily. Moreover, he didn't even see clearly how the other party did it. Boom! At this moment, Chi Mei had already self-destructed. That was the last thing he could do at the last moment. The result was the same as Chun Yuchao's spell. The mushroom cloud rose up and dispersed layer by layer. Crack! Even the boundary set up by the power of the star boundary was starting to break. That kind of power was too concentrated and too violent. The cultivators floating around the black-robed young man all frowned. At this moment, the black-robed young man glanced in the direction Sumo had escaped and sneered. Then, he pressed his hands together and opened his mouth. Inhale. The power of Chi Mei's self-destruction was rising. However, the black-robed young man's hands seemed to be able to stop all power. In Moon Capital, there were still some cultivators who hadn't died. They saw the Moon Empress seal the mushroom cloud with their own eyes. Then, the Moon Empress opened her mouth and swallowed all the power. At that moment, It was like a child slowly eating a black cotton candy. At the same time, the black coffin under the black-robed young man's feet gradually disappeared. Just now, it was like the end of the world. However, after the black-robed young man made his move, everything calmed down. Although the surroundings were tragic and Moon Capital had been reduced to ruins, the battle was over. Greetings to the Empress. Congratulations to the Moon Empress for coming back to the human world and quelling the rebellion. At this moment, the cultivators around the black-robed young man suddenly knelt in the void and paid their respects. Greetings to the Empress. Congratulations to the Moon Empress for coming back to the human world and quelling the rebellion. Every life form might have a kind of latent blind obedience, especially after surviving a disaster. When the ordinary cultivators in Moon Capital saw this scene, they all knelt down and cheered loudly. The truth was often not known by the secular world. Everything that happened on this day would be recorded in the history of the Demon Moon as the great Moon Empresses quelling the rebellion. At this time, Sumo had already left Moon Imperial Star boundary with Chun Yu-Cho. Chapter 7:13. The demonic moon world had a total of 9 stars. Other than the Moon Imperial Star, there were 8 others. Each of the 8 stars had their own unique characteristics. Sumo left the Moon Imperial Star realm with Chun Yu-Cho and appeared between the Moon Imperial Star and the Jade Earth Star. At that moment, the Moon Imperial Star's aura had completely disappeared. They were safe. Thank you for saving my life. On the demonic arc, Chun Yu-Cho bowed deeply to Sumo. Hee. Sumo laughed. Taoist Chun Yu, you don't have to be so polite. To be honest, I saved you because I have a request. Because I want to know more about the situation in the Demon Moon world, especially about that black-robed young man. Regardless, without your help, I would have died in the demonic Moon Imperial Palace. Chun Yu-Cho smiled bitterly. If you have a request, I will tell you everything I know. However, I haven't asked for your name. Sumo. Sumo smiled and said, I come from Dongyi, Star Dominion. Chun Yu-Cho greets you again, Taoist Su. Chun Yu-Cho said, if you don't mind, you can come to my Fire Cloud Palace. If there's anything, we can discuss it in detail. It's a small world and is absolutely safe. All right. Sumo nodded. Chun Yu-Cho led the way, and they went straight to Fire Cloud Palace. There was a starry sky between the Jade Earth Star and the Zhuyin Star. This place was extremely far from the Moon Imperial Star. From the outside, it looked ordinary. At that moment, Sumo's demonic arc stopped in this starry sky. We're here. Brother Su, please wait a moment, Chun Yu-Cho said. Then, Chun Yu-Cho formed a seal with both hands. It was a seal to open up space. Looking again, there was a ball of fire in this starry sky. The ball of fire was very strange. The outer flame was red, and the inner flame was blue. In the beginning, it was like a broken lamp, but it gradually grew to the size of a fist. Whoosh! Chun Yu-Cho's seal changed. The ball of fire suddenly grew bigger. In an instant, it turned into 2 large doors. One door red, the other blue. The 2 doors were overflowing with light, as if layers of flames were leaping about. And in the middle of the 2 doors were 3 large words, Fire Cloud Palace. Sumo, this Fire Cloud Palace is a wondrous place, said Yi Wu-Hui. Hee. If it wasn't for this strange land, I'm afraid we wouldn't be able to establish ourselves in the Demon Moon world. Sumo replied, Brother Su, please. At this moment, Chun Yu-Cho extended his hand in invitation. Please. Sumo nodded with a smile. Then, she put away the demonic arc and walked into Fire Cloud Palace with Chun Yu-Cho. Inside and outside the door were 2 different worlds. As soon as she entered the door, Sumo felt a strong spiritual aura assaulting her. Looking again, this world had mountains in the distance and water nearby. The mountains and rivers complemented each other, creating a unique charm. Between the mountains and rivers, there was a small manor. Inside the manor, there were a few low-rise houses that were simple in style and emitted an otherworldly aura. However, when Sumo scanned with her perception, other than the immortal herbs and spirit trees, she did not discover any life in the small world. Sumo turned her head to look. Behind them was a mountain. One side of the mountain was red, while the other side was blue. Presumably, this was the door to Fire Cloud Palace. And as Sumo and Chun Yu-Cho stood still, the mountain vanished. "Is Taoist Chun Yu alone in this Fire Cloud Palace?" asked Sumo. "Haha, that's right." Chun Yu-Cho gave a wry smile. "To be honest, Brother Su, this was a sealed land that was specially set up to trap me. However, I later cracked the seal and was able to enter freely. I even modified this place into a cave abode." "Oh, I wonder who sealed Taoist Chun Yu?" asked Sumo. "The previous Moon Empress," said Chun Yu-Cho helplessly. "The previous Moon Empress?" Sumo could not help but be taken aback. "Haha, it's a long story." Chun Yu-Cho shook his head. "Brother Su, let's talk inside." With that said, Chun Yu-Cho led Sumo into the manor. Along the way, Sumo saw quite a number of exotic flowers and plants. The feeling of this place was somewhat similar to his soul-storing altar cave abode. There was a room filled with all sorts of books. From the looks of it, it was a library. There was a stone table and stone chairs in the room. "Brother Su, please have a seat," Chun Yu-Cho said awkwardly. "My humble abode is simple. Usually, no one comes here. Brother Su, you are the first cultivator to enter Fire Cloud Palace other than me." "Oh? Haha." Sumo could not help but be taken aback before he said with a smile, "Then, thank you for your trust, Taoist Chun Yu." With that said, Chun Yu-Cho waved his hand. A teapot and teacups appeared on the stone table. "Usually, I don't have any hobbies, so I often drink tea alone. Today, I'll invite Brother Su to have a taste." With that said, Chun Yu-Cho poured tea for Sumo and also for himself. The fragrance of the tea wafted. Sumo raised the teacup and saw that the tea was green in color. However, there was a hint of red light in the middle of the tea that stood in the water. The water shimmered and a spiritual energy surged into her nostrils. "Taoist Chun Yu, this is good tea. This is the first time I'm seeing it," Sumo said. "Haha, this is a specialty of my Fire Cloud Palace. I call it a wisp of loyalty." Chun Yu-Cho laughed before he downed the tea in one gulp. "How was that tasting tea?" It was clearly drinking wine. "Huh." Sumo could not help but have her heart stir when she heard that. This tea seemed to have a deeper meaning. Therefore, Sumo mimicked Chun Yu-Cho and did not savor it carefully. Instead, she tilted her head back. A cup of tea was downed. "Good tea. Good name," Sumo said with a smile. Chun Yu-Cho looked at Sumo with a complicated expression. Perhaps he never expected that Sumo would imitate him in drinking tea. "A wisp of loyalty." Sumo smiled lightly. "Taoist Chun Yu, is there a meaning behind the name of this tea? Could it be that you are using this to express your determination?" "Ha ha ha." Chun Yu-Cho could not help but laugh out loud when he heard Sumo's question. However, his laughter was not heroic because his voice was shrill and ear-piercing. Therefore, Chun Yu-Cho's laughter appeared extremely painful and sorrowful. At that instant, Sumo could even see the tears in Chun Yu-Cho's eyes. "Sumo, he is a person in great pain." Yi Wu Hui sighed softly. "In fact, why would a person who is not in great pain live alone in a lifeless Fire Cloud Palace?" Cough, cough, cough. As he laughed, Chun Yu-Cho suddenly coughed. Originally, he was heavily injured and his face was extremely pale. However, at that moment, his face suffused a red flush. However, that flush gave off a sickly feeling. It was unknown if it was from laughing or coughing, but tears finally flowed from the corners of Chun Yu-Cho's eyes. "Brother Su, sorry for the embarrassment." As he spoke, Chun Yu-Cho suppressed his coughing and took out a red porcelain bottle. He poured out 3 pills. Sumo had never seen those 3 pills before. However, from their color and fragrance, Sumo could determine that they were 3 samsara-grade pills. They were definitely priceless. Chun Yu-Cho raised his head and swallowed all 3 pills. "Taoist Chun Yu." Sumo could not help but want to stop him. The medicinal effects seemed too strong. Chun Yu-Cho waved his hand and poured another cup of tea. "Brother Su, I will use tea in place of wine to toast you. A wisp of loyalty." Sumo raised her cup and smiled. "A wisp of loyalty." Chun Yucho smiled. Pa. The two cups collided, and the two drank it in one gulp. It is hard to find a soulmate in life. Chun Yucho sat upright in his cup and looked at Sumo. He smiled sadly. Everyone says that I, Chun Yucho, am neither male nor female, neither yin nor yang. However, Brother Su can actually understand a wisp of my loyalty. Heh. It's not easy. Brother Su, what do you want to know? Ask quickly, because I only have 3 days left to live. Chapter 714. The last 3 days of his life? When Sumo heard that, he could not help but frown. He had made an estimate of Chun Yucho's injuries. The technique he had used back then was similar to his self-detonation technique. The instantaneous power was extremely powerful, but also drained Chun Yucho greatly, especially when it blew up a black-clothed avatar. That avatar was almost identical to the real body, in Sumo's opinion. Those could have caused Chun Yucho to be seriously injured, or even cause his cultivation realm to drop, but it was unlikely to be enough to kill him. Chun Yucho saw the shock in Sumo's eyes. Brother Su, for a person like me to drop my cultivation realm, it's no different from death. Chun Yucho, have lived a proud life. How can I allow myself to be inferior to my former self? That kind of suffering is not something I can endure. Sumo looked at Chun Yucho without a word. His name is Cho, and his person is ugly, but he has a proud and sensitive heart. Yi Wu Hue sighed lightly. If he cannot be a hero, he might as well die. Brother Su, what I just ate were soul-returning pills in 1 day. 1 pill can indeed revive the soul, but 3 pills are fatal. However, in these last 3 days, I can still maintain my cultivation realm, or even have more powerful combat strength. 3 days later, I will be reduced to ashes, forever severed from samsara. With that said, Chun Yucho smiled and filled a cup of tea for himself, downing it in 1 gulp. Sumo looked at Chun Yucho and smiled helplessly. At that moment, Sumo did not know what to say, but he felt touched. He did not understand Chun Yucho, and it could even be said that they were strangers who met by chance. He had indeed saved Chun Yucho because he wanted to know more about the Fiend Moon world. However, be it Fire Cloud Palace's setup, or the name of the wisp of Loyalty Heart Tea, or even Chun Yucho's final act of eating 3 soul-returning pills, all of this made Sumo feel that Chun Yucho had a different soul. Brother Chun Yucho, in fact, you have always been courting death. Sumo drank a cup of tea with Chun Yucho. Chun Yucho's eyes lit up slightly. Brother Su, to have a confidant like you in these last 3 days. I can die with no regrets. So, you broke into the Moon Imperial Palace alone? Sumo smiled. Actually, you have no chance of winning in the Moon Imperial Palace, even if you were at the 7th level of the Eternal Realm, right? That's right. Chun Yucho smiled bitterly. When I went to Moon Imperial Palace, I didn't plan on coming back alive. Either you kill me, Chi Mei, or I'll perish together with Moon Palace. I even want to destroy the entire Moon Imperial Star. Why? Sumo frowned. Who exactly are you in the Demon Moon world? It's a long story. Chun Yucho poured another cup of tea for Sumo and himself, then took a sip before saying slowly, the 9 stars of Devil Moon world were originally barren. They used to be as desolate and dead as the other small worlds in the Dead Soul star domain. Later, the first Moon Empress appeared out of nowhere. He was shockingly talented and could move unhindered among the dead spirits. He had founded the Devil Moon Empire. After thousands of years, he gradually unified the 5 stars. That's how the so-called Devil Moon Empire came into being. What was the first Moon Empress name? Sumo asked. I don't know. Chun Yucho shook his head. Because I've never seen him. We only know that he was the Moon Empress. Sumo nodded. The second Moon Empress succeeded the throne 13 million years ago. His surname was Chunyu. My surname was given to me by the second Moon Empress. However, when Moon Empress Chunyu succeeded the throne, I was just a lowly being on a small planet in the Dead Soul star domain. At that time, I never thought that I would one day be powerful enough to control the entire Devil Moon. Sumo smiled. My home star is called the Bitter Abyss. It's an extremely barren and ugly world. Chun Yu Chao's lips twitched coldly. All the ugliness you can imagine exists in that world. And all the ugliness you can imagine exists in that world. In that world, there's not only blood and slaughter, there's also destruction. Blood and slaughter can only be seen as a red embellishment. Hee hee. Chun Yu Cho laughed crazily. In that world, there's no law, no ethics, no love, no hate. I don't even think the creatures in that world can be called humans. Chun Yu Cho smiled coldly. I'm actually a yin and yang person. Chun Yu Cho used a special sharp voice and said self-mockingly, neither male nor female, neither yin nor yang. When I was 13, I wanted to jump off a cliff to die, because I lived only as a joke in other people's eyes. They didn't kill me, they just humiliated me. So I chose death. Hee hee. Chun Yu Cho took a sip of tea and calmed himself down. Then, he seemed to be telling a story. I already jumped off the cliff. I still remember that moment. It was so beautiful. Chun Yu Chao's eyes flashed with a sincere smile. However, that feeling made people sigh in fear. But Moon Empress Chun, you saved me. The light in Chun Yu Chao's eyes disappeared. Then he taught me everything, gave me everything. It can be said that without Moon Empress Chun Yu, there wouldn't be me. Ah Cho. Chun Yu Cho shook his teacup like he was shaking a cup of wine. He treated me like a son. I treated him like a father. Chun Yu Cho laughed and then let out a long sigh. Even though I'm neither male nor female, neither yin nor yang, my cultivation talent is the best in the entire Demon Moon world. Even Moon Empress Chun Yu's realm is lower than mine. I followed Moon Empress Chun Yu, opened up new territories, quelled rebellions, and finally unified the 9 stars. Countless military achievements. So, I was conferred the title of Demon Moon State Preceptor. Demon Moon State Preceptor? Sumo's lips curled. Once, he led the great Murong dynasty. He understood that the title of State Preceptor wasn't something anyone could take on. Civil and military strategy, not a single one, could be lacking. That's right. Demon Moon State Preceptor, Chun Yu Cho said. That was probably the most glorious moment of my life. The 3 words, Chun Yu Cho, once resounded throughout the Demon Moon world. And then, Sumo asked, then I assisted 3 generations of Moon Empresses. Chun Yu Cho smiled faintly. The so-called Flowing Moon Empress, the Iron State Preceptor, because my realm was far above them. The first generation Moon Empress passed the throne to Moon Empress Chun Yu. Because Moon Empress Chun Yu had countless military achievements, he had both integrity and talent. But after Moon Empress Chun Yu, he passed the throne to his son. He cannot pass it to you. Sumo smiled. You will not be Moon Empress. That's right. Chun Yu Cho said, Demon Moon world needs a pure bloodline Moon Empress, not a yin-yang person. I cannot be Moon Empress, but I can let Chun Yu's bloodline sit firmly on the throne. Because with me, their realms are not important. As long as I don't die, I can protect them for thousands of generations. Chun Yu Chao's face tightened. Protecting Moon Empress Chun Yu's descendants is your heart's obsession. Sumo smiled again. You only want to repay Moon Empress Chun Yu's kindness. Yes. Chun Yu Cho nodded. Once, I consider myself as the protector of Moon Empress. My words, in the entire Demon Moon dynasty, are as good as gold. Hee hee. Sumo shook her head. Brother Chun Yu, you have committed a great taboo. Hee hee. Chun Yu Cho almost laughed and cried as he nodded. Either you kill Moon Empress and become your own king, or you retreat and cultivate in seclusion. Sumo said slowly, those are your choices, but you are too attached to Chun Yu's bloodline. Kill, you will not do it. Retreat, you are worried. So, you are in a dilemma. If you do not make a decision, there will be changes. Chun Yu Cho raised his teacup. Brother Su, if I met you earlier, I might have listened to you, but it is too late now. Chapter 7:15. Time would always change the taste of everything. Chun Yu-cho was right. If he had met Sumo earlier, he might have listened to him. But that might not be the case. Many things, if one did not experience it, how could one understand? After all, Chun Yu-cho was a conceited and proud person. Hundreds of thousands of years ago, the entire Devil Moon Empire already had an undercurrent against me. Chun Yu-cho sneered. However, I did not take it to heart. Those clowns were not even worth mentioning. Plus, I was loyal to Devil Moon Empire. I never had any ulterior motives. I have a clear conscience. Furthermore, in the entire Demon Moon world, no one is a match for you, Sutomo said with a smile. I think that in the end, you lost because of these thoughts. Hee. Chun Yu-cho laughed and nodded. That's right. Although I have no ulterior motives, it does not mean that others do not think I have ulterior motives. Plus, my surname is Chun Yu. Once I had absolute power, below only one and above millions. In the entire Devil Moon world, other than Moon Empress, there was only me. Then, Devil Moon Empire had a high priest. Chi-mei, Sumo said. Yes, Chun Yu-cho said. Then it must be Moon Empress intention. Sumo's lips curled. She took a sip of tea. You have already surpassed her. Moon Empress needs another person to balance your power. Indeed, Chun Yu-cho sighed. At first, Chi-mei was only a one-generation immortal rank cultivator. However, he was extremely talented. Then, with Moon Empress support, he became a rebirth rank cultivator, and even passed through the 5 decay realm peacefully. During this period, you actually still had opportunities. Sumo smiled. Hee. Indeed, there were opportunities. Chun Yu-cho smiled. However, I did not want those opportunities. Actually, if Chi-mei could shoulder everything of Devil Moon, I am willing to live in seclusion. But he could not make you feel at ease, or did something happen? Sumo asked. Indeed, Chun Yu-cho said, Chi-mei's ability to govern a country is not a problem. However, 300,000 years ago, the Moon Empress contracted a strange disease. The Moon Empress has a strange disease? Sumo was also stunned. Actually, apart from the first Moon Empress and the Chun Yu Moon Empress, none of their successors were able to reach the Eternal Realm. However, they all had the power to control the 9 stars of the Devil Moon, and they also had the ability to control the souls of Devil Moon cultivators. It is said that it is a kind of talisman that the first Moon Empress planted in the demonic moon world. That kind of talisman can make the Devil Moon cultivators submit instantly. In other words, the Moon Empress has absolute power in the demonic moon world? Sumo frowned. Then why does he have to worry about your power? Because that charm is ineffective against me. Chun Yu-cho looked at Sumo with a complicated expression. Why? Sumo asked. I don't know either. Chun Yu-cho smiled bitterly. And that's not a secret. Everyone in the Devil Moon Empire knew about it. My power, the Imperial Preceptor, is not controlled by the Moon Empress. Oh. Hearing this, Sumo looked playful. Really? Hee. Chun Yu-cho looked at Sumo and said, Brother Su, do you think it is true or false? False. Sumo sneered. Because if it is true, how did the Moon Empress seal you in the end? He just doesn't want to admit that he has that kind of power. It seems that the Moon Empress has a big problem with you. He doesn't want you to control everything in the Devil Moon anymore. But you're the 3rd-generation Imperial Preceptor, and it is not good to get rid of you directly. He needs a strong reason to stop people's mouths. So, the news that you are not controlled must have been spread by the Moon Empress. Huh. Chun Yu-cho couldn't help but laugh. Brother Su, you really see through it. My loyalty is pure, but the Moon Empress doesn't know? This gives them a chance. They? Hearing this, Sumo said, a force that can't be seen or understood. Chun Yu-cho's voice deepened. Even now, I can't see through it. Maybe it's a demon. Oh. Sumo put down the teacup in her hand. She felt that Chun Yu-cho was about to get to the point. Just now, I said that the Moon Empress had a serious illness. Chun Yu-cho said, in fact, the 4th Moon Empress always wanted to break through to the rebirth state, and before that, there must be the 5 blights. The 5 blights means that he will become immortal, Sumo said. That's right. Chun Yucho nodded. However, this is not a big problem, because he can stay in the Moon Imperial Palace and live peacefully. However, when the fourth Moon Empress's 5 blights was about to end, the bloodbath suddenly broke into the Moon Imperial planet. Bloodbath. Sumo remembered the conversation with the cultivator in the inn. Bloodbath, a dead spirit beast. There seemed to be lingering fear in Chun Yuchao's eyes. We don't know where that bloodbat came from, but it attacked the Moon Imperial planet and even went straight to the Moon Imperial Palace. That was a great disaster. Countless people died on the Moon Imperial planet. It was a disaster. Can't you subdue it? What realm is that beast? Sumo said. The bloodbat is a beast that is almost at the eternal state. Its realm is not high. Chun Yucho said. Its power lies in the ability to duplicate infinitely. Duplicate infinitely? As long as one vampire bat absorbs enough blood, it can split into 2. Once they reach a scale of tens of thousands, a Bat King will be born. This Bat King can use the ability of immortality. However, if the Bat King is subdued, the other bloodbats will automatically die, Chun Yucho said. Now, there is a Bat King in the Black Moon Tower? Sumo asked. Yes. In the end, Chi Mei and I worked together to seal it. Chun Yucho said, only then did we resolve that disaster. The bloodbat is from a hidden demon clan. Sumo squinted her eyes and asked. Hee. Chun Yucho shook his head. I'm not sure. However, from then on, the rumor that the Moon Empress is a hidden demon clan started to appear. That bloodbat king once broke into the palace. The fourth Moon Empress saw it. After that, the Moon Empress fell into a coma. She fell into a coma for 200,000 years. 200,000 years. Sumo raised her eyebrows. That's right. 200,000 years. Chun Yucho let out a long sigh. During these 200,000 years, he lay in the black hall of the Moon Empress as if he was asleep. We thought of many ways, but we couldn't wake him up. At the same time, during these 200,000 years, I handed over almost all the national affairs to Chi Mei. Later on, we only know that there is a high priest in the Demon Moon world, but not a grandmaster. And I have been by the Moon Empress' side, watching over him day and night. I only hope that he will wake up one day. He. Upon saying this, Chun Yucho could not help but laugh sadly. 30,000 years ago, the Moon Empress suddenly woke up. Chun Yucho had a complicated look in his eyes, but Chun Yucho's eyebrows twitched slightly. However, the first thing he did was to bestow upon me Fire Cloud Palace and imprison me here. Chapter 716. After sleeping for 200,000 years, the fourth Moon Empress suddenly woke up. But the first thing he did was to imprison Chun Yucho in Fire Cloud Palace. This was very illogical. Why did he imprison you? Asked Sumo. For the demonic moon's eternal existence. Chun Yucho smiled helplessly. Eternal existence of the demonic moon. Sumo was taken aback before she smiled. That is an interesting reason. It seems that your authority has been completely stripped away in these 200,000 years. Did you resist back then? No. Chun Yucho shook his head. Firstly, I was loyal to the previous Moon Empress. How could I go against my superiors? Secondly, even if my realm was higher than the Moon Empress, he could still suppress me, because I was a citizen of the demonic moon. Furthermore, he had already reached the rebirth realm. There is no point in resisting. Obedience is loyalty. Chun Yucho poured himself another cup of tea before downing it. So, you were imprisoned in this Fire Cloud Palace? Sumo said. That's right. Chun Yucho said. However, Fire Cloud Palace was only a small palace with a barrier. It was between the Black Temple and the Black Moon Tower. At first, I was dispirited for 10,000 years and lived in depression. But in less than 3,000 years, there was news from the outside. What news? The fourth Moon Empress has passed away, said Chun Yucho. Rebirth realm? Passed away? Sumo found it unbelievable. Since he had stepped into the rebirth realm, his lifespan should be counted in millions of years. How could he pass away in 3,000 years? That is indeed strange, said Chun Yucho. Unfortunately, I was imprisoned in Fire Cloud Palace. But after hearing of the Moon Empress' death, I changed my attitude, because I felt that something was amiss. So, I searched day and night for a technique to cross realms. After 10,000 years, I finally opened Fire Cloud Palace and walked out. Chun Yucho exhaled deeply. Back then, the entire demonic moon world was controlled by Chi Mei, just like me back then. There was no fifth Moon Empress, asked Sumo. No, Chun Yucho shook his head, because the fourth Moon Empress had no children. Before he died, he didn't appoint a successor of the Moon Empress. Chi Mei, why don't you choose a new Moon Empress or make yourself independent? Sumo said. Ha! Chun Yucho gave a cold laugh. Actually, this is also a question that I have not been able to understand. At present, the only reason was that the fourth Moon Empress said before she died that she would be reborn through reincarnation. Chi Mei is carrying out the Moon Empress' last wish. Reincarnation? Sumo frowned. But that's the reason Chi Mei gave me. Chun Yucho said, that year when I came out of seclusion, I did see the fourth Moon Emperor lying in that black coffin, but he definitely didn't look like that black-robed youth. This is also the first time you've seen that black-clothed youth. Sumo's brows furrowed even tighter. The first time, Chun Yucho said, he is not the fourth Moon Empress. However, I can't explain why he has the ability to control the 9 stars of the Devil Moon, and why he has such a strong demonic aura. Then why did Chi Mei say that he was the Moon Empress? Sumo asked. Now, I'm not sure either. Chun Yucho shook his head. Back then, after I left Fire Cloud Palace, I had a conversation with Chi Mei, but he didn't elaborate. He only said that the Moon Empress would definitely wake up, and that the Moon Empress would lead the Fiend Moon to greater glory. As for me, I didn't believe him. So, you chose to take Fire Cloud Palace with you, and eventually settled down in the interstellar space. Sumo said, yes. Chun Yucho nodded. During that period, I returned twice, but there was nothing abnormal in the Moon Emperor Palace. It can be said that Chi Mei managed the entire Fiend Moon world in good order, and the country was peaceful. However, the Moon Empress never had the so-called reincarnation. After that, I almost never returned. In a blink of an eye, more than 10,000 years passed. In fact, before the final battle, I always suspected that Chi Mei wanted to control a puppet to control the entire Fiend Moon world. However, he chose to self-destruct in the end, dispelling my thoughts. As for Chi Mei's choice, I still don't understand it. Why was he so certain that the black-robed youth was the Moon Empress? He must have sensed the demonic aura. Then, was your infiltration of the palace a coincidence? It wasn't a coincidence, Chun Yucho said, because in the past few centuries, I've heard many rumors, especially about the Moon Empress being a demon. There have been more and more rumors, and there's even a title. What title? Demon Emperor, Chun Yucho said. Demon Emperor? Sumo's expression changed. Where did this title come from? Of course it's from Fiend Moon cultivators, Chun Yucho said. Furthermore, these Fiend Moon cultivators are basically pilgrims. They seem to be deliberately spreading these rumors. Speaking of pilgrims, I would like to ask, some people say that there was a pilgrimage before Moon Capital. Is that right? Sumo asked. Yes, the pilgrimage was indeed earlier than Moon Capital. Chun Yucho laughed. However, that was only a method the first Moon Empress used to win over the hearts of the people, to establish her imperial might. In the past, all pilgrims who came would receive some benefits. The first Moon Empress had powerful magic power. Basically, she could fulfill all the wishes of the pilgrims. Afterwards, there were more and more pilgrims. The Fiend Moon Empire set a difficulty for the pilgrimage, and the number of people who could walk the pilgrimage was very few. Afterwards, there was a protective talisman. Sumo said, protective talisman? Chun Yucho was stunned. You don't know? Sumo opened her hand, and a protective talisman appeared. It's this, Huang. Chun Yucho was slightly stunned. What's the use of this talisman? Who made it? And why is it this strange Huang character again? This talisman can protect the pilgrims from dying on the pilgrimage, but it can only be used 3 times. Sumo said, because now, the people of Moon Capital say, the pilgrimage is either life or death. It comes from the fiend Moon Imperial Palace. From what you're saying, you've seen this extra stroke, Huang character many times. Fiend Moon Imperial Palace? Chun Yucho frowned. This Huang character is indeed special. Actually, I haven't seen the Huang character many times. But it seems to be related to the 4th Moon Empress. Oh, what's the relationship? Sumo asked. Brother Su, you might not have noticed. If you look down from a void, you'll find that the entire Black Temple is actually a Huang character. Chun Yucho said. Behind it, there's a very large space. The Black Temple is a Huang character. Sumo's heart moved. He really didn't notice this before, because he was always looking at it from a level perspective. Sumo, the Black Temple is the historical remains that we saw in the Broken Star Zone. Yi Wu Hui said. The Black Temple is a Huang character. It was built by the 4th Moon Empress. Chun Yucho said, didn't that youngster also have a Huang character between his eyebrows? There's also a protective talisman. Chun Yucho's expression changed slightly. Could it be that I'm wrong? But how can the Fiend Moon Imperial family be a demon? Demon Emperor. These 2 words lingered in Sumo's and Chun Yucho's minds. Chapter 717. Brother Chun Yu, how much do you know about the Yizong demon race? Sumo said. Chun Yucho said, although I am a rebirth realm cultivator, I have never left the Dead Soul Star Field. My knowledge about the Yizong demon race comes from Chun Yu Moon Emperor, because he once met a Yizong demon race in the northern part of the Dead Soul Star Field. The northern part of the Dead Soul Star Field? Sumo asked. Yes. Chun Yucho said. At that time, Chun Yu Moon Emperor had not succeeded the throne. He said that he once fought with a demon race in the northern region. That demon race turned out to be a cat. Cat? Yi Wu Hui was shocked. A cat? Sumo also raised an eyebrow. Could it be a 9-tailed black cat? Chun Yucho looked at Sumo, his eyes revealing a trace of surprise. It is indeed a black cat, but Chun Yu Moon Emperor did not mention any 9-tailed. At that time, that demon was only a 1-era immortal realm. Its incarnation was a cultivator wearing a black robe and bamboo hat. 9-tailed raccoon. Yi Wu Hui said to Sumo, at that time, it should not have reached the rebirth realm. Yes, it was him. Sumo blurted out. Who? Chun Yucho said. 9-tailed raccoon. The one Chun Yu Moon Emperor met back then should be him. He is a Yizong demon race, because I once fought with him and almost died in his hands. Sumo said. Chun Yucho asked. That year, that cat demon lost to Chun Yu Moon Emperor and never appeared again. Brother Su, when did you meet it? Not long ago. Sumo smiled bitterly in his heart, because he could not explain to Chun Yucho that he came from Dong E Starfield in the future. If that was the case, it was probably almost 20 million years since Chun Yu Moon Emperor fought 9-tailed raccoon. I met 9-tailed raccoon in Dong E Starfield. Now, he was already a reincarnation-level demon. Perhaps the battle between Moon Empress Chunyu and him is the reason why the demon clan has come to the Dead Soul Star Domain. Of course, there's another possibility. Sumo said slowly. What possibility? Chun Yucho asked. First, the demon clan wants to control the entire Dead Soul Star Field, and the Devil Moon Empire is the overlord of the Dead Soul Star Field. Once I control you, the other small worlds are not worth mentioning. Sumo said. Brother Su, does this mean that the black-clothed youth is from Hidden Yao race? Chun Yucho asked. Yes, the possibility is very high. Sumo nodded. Because other than Yizong's demon clan, I believe that other cultivators should not have such a strong demon aura. First there was 9-tailed raccoon, then there was the Bloodbat King, and now there's a black-clothed youth with demonic aura. Huh? Chun Yucho laughed coldly. Yizong Yao, perhaps it really is that unseen power. But if that black-clothed youth is really a Yizong Yao, how can he control the Devil Moon Starfield? Huh? Sumo smiled playfully, because he is also the Moon Empress. Oh, Chun Yucho was a little surprised. What I mean is Sumo paused, and then said the Moon Empress and the Demon Clan may have merged into one, because he has reincarnated, and once he reincarnates, many things are not easy to control. You don't know what happened to him. This can explain a lot of things that happened before. Chime may have already known some clues, so he believed that it was the Moon Empress, and even accepted the fact that the Moon Empress is a demon. And you became the Moon Empress' biggest obstacle. So he wants to kill you. Sumo said, the Moon Empress understands that you are the most powerful and the most conservative existence in the Devil Moon world. You are the Devil Moon's Grand Elder, so you will definitely not accept the Demon Clan's Moon Empress. Merged into one. The Demon Clan's Moon Empress? The Demon Clan's Moon Empress? Chun Yucho muttered to himself, frowning. He didn't want to believe Sumo's deduction, but Sumo's deduction could explain a lot of things. He had to believe it. Which Huang character? Chun Yucho suddenly asked. What does it mean? That day, the light array that Chi Mei set up was also a Huang character. That seems to confirm what Brother Su said, that Chi Mei knew something. Otherwise, he wouldn't have used the souls of the worshippers to set up the Huang character light array to awaken the Moon Empress. Huang. Sumo's mouth curved. That might be a person's name. But I can't say for sure that the black-clothed youngster is that person, or that person is related to the power behind him. Who is that person? Chun Yucho continued to ask. A person I'm looking for. Sumo smiled faintly. He may have come from the reincarnation of a more distant world. Right now, it is not convenient for me to tell you everything. Brother Chun Yu, have you heard of the Chun Luo 7 Stars Small World? Chun Luo 7 Stars Small World? Chun Yucho thought for a while. In the northernmost part of the Dead Soul Star region, there seems to be a small world called Chun Luo. Although it has the same name as Chun Luo, it is only a low-level small world. However, that's only a low-level small world. It can't be compared to the Demon Moon at all. Hee. Indeed. Sumo nodded. It is at the northernmost part of the Dead Soul Star region. It is said that if you go north for tens of thousands of miles, you will reach the star boundary barrier. After passing through it, you will reach the Wisdom World. Yes, I have heard of it too. Chun Yucho said, the Wisdom World is the same as the Chun Luo world. It is a medium-level world. It is the territory of the hidden demon race. There are shadows of the demon race in the Chun Luo 7 Stars Small World. Sumo said, the Demon Moon is in the south, and the Chun Luo is in the north. The north and south seem to be slowly being controlled by the hidden demon race. The hidden demon race seems to be setting up a big trap. The demon race's goal is probably not just the Demon Moon, but the entire Dead Souls Star region. So, Brother Chun Yu, maybe the Demon Moon world is just a chess piece for them. Hee. The Demon Moon world is just a chess piece? Chun Yucho frowned, and then poured himself a cup of tea. No worries. Chun Yucho smiled in relief. I have less than 3 days to live. Actually, the moment I decided to enter the Moon Imperial Palace again and decided to show myself, I put everything down. Chun Yucho took a sip of tea. Brother Su, I have lived for millions of years, and my heart was only for the Demon Moon. But later, I found out that it was all for naught, and many things were like looking at flowers through a fog. If the Moon Empress became a demon race, then why should I be so stubborn? I, Chun Yucho, have a clear conscience towards the Demon Moon. Whether I am understood or not, it is no longer important who the Moon Empress is. The Demon Moon has its own path. The demon race has its own path. It is time for me, this old antique, to go. Chun Yucho's last words were not lonely, but very calm, because he was really relieved. Never relieved, to anger, to struggle, and finally relieved. That was the development of many things. Brother Chun Yu, let me toast you. Sumo replaced the wine with tea again. The two of them drank a cup of wine together. In fact, Sumo had wine on her, but she knew that a person like Chun Yucho seemed to prefer drinking tea, because he was a kingdom knight at heart. He had come and gone in a storm of blood. But life and death were just a cup of tea, because they wished to die with a clear mind. Such a clear mind was not to know the entire truth, but to let go of one's heart. Boom! Rumble. And at that moment, the entire fire cloud palace suddenly quaked. Outside the fire cloud barrier, an extremely powerful force seemed to explode. Chapter 718. Bang! The house that Sumo and Chun Yucho were in started to shake. On the bookshelf, ancient books were scattered, and bamboo slips were flying everywhere. Chun Yucho could not help but narrow his eyes. Someone actually found Fire Cloud Palace? One had to know that even Chi Mei did not know where this place was. This place should be absolutely safe. Looks like we're being followed. Sumo smiled coldly and stood up. If it's a blessing, it's not a curse. If it's a curse, it can't be avoided. Chun Yucho also stood up, then filled a cup of tea for himself and Sumo. Brother Su, the last cup. Chun Yucho very formally raised the cup in front of his chest. Brother Chun Yu. Sumo also raised her cup with both hands. No matter who it is, I will defend with all my strength. Chun Yucho laughed. Brother Su, you don't have to save me again. I am a cultivator of the Devil Moon. I was born here, and I shall be buried here. I can help you escape, Sumo slowly said. Hee, there's no need. Chun Yucho shook his head. Brother Su, you should know my intentions. I originally wanted to die. You can go alone. Acho, I hope that Brother Su can fulfill my wish. Finishing, without waiting for Sumo to say anything, Chun Yucho drank the last cup of tea. Then, Chun Yucho took out a green wooden box from his bosom. Brother Su, there are some old items in this wooden box. Everything I have learned in my life has been compiled into a book and placed inside. I'll give those old items to Brother Su as a souvenir. The cultivation technique within it is not worth Brother Su studying. Brother Su, please help me find a cultivator from the Devil Moon world in the future and pass it down. This is the last thing I can do for MOU. Chun Yucho smiled. Sumo looked at Chun Yucho, and her heart couldn't help but warm up. Chun Yucho was neither male nor female, neither yin nor yang. He was extremely ugly, but his sincerity towards MOU was truly moving. Actually, Sumo really wanted to tell Chun Yucho the entire 9 stars of the Devil Moon had been destroyed in the end. His beloved Demon Moon had finally turned into dust in the vast universe. However, Sumo couldn't open her mouth, since Chun Yucho chose to die. Then, Sumo still hoped that he would die with pride and dignity, and not with endless regret. All right, Sumo finally nodded. Brother Chun Yu, don't worry. Sumo, will definitely do it for you. Sumo raised her head and finished the cup of cold tea. Then, she took the green wooden box and put it into her storage pouch. Ha ha ha, GGG. Chun Yucho couldn't help but laugh towards the sky. However, his laughter sounded like the wailing of ghosts and the howling of wolves. Brother Su, I can die without regrets. Bang! Chun Yucho extended his body and directly soared into the air. In an instant, the room exploded. Chun Yucho formed a seal and rushed out. At that moment, the red and blue mountains appeared once again in the Fire Cloud world. The entire Fire Cloud world had already begun to collapse. Outside Fire Cloud Palace was the power of the 9th firmament of Samsara realm. Sumo's heart couldn't help but tighten. There were still cultivators of the 9th level of the Eternal Realm in the Demon Moon world. After all, even Chi Mei and the Black Robe Youth didn't seem to have such power. Then who could it be? Sumo, be careful. Yi Wuhui couldn't help but warn. Boom! Ka! Boom! And just as Yi Wuhui's voice faded, the red and blue mountains in the Fire Cloud world suddenly collapsed. Countless rubble fell like a meteor shower. Fortunately, Chun Yucho stood in the void. He spread his hands, and his red robe fluttered. Hu! Wu! Chi-chi! Chi-chi! All the rubble was blocked by him, otherwise the entire Fire Cloud world would have been unrecognizable. Even so, the entire Fire Cloud boundary began to crumble. Mountains crumbled and the ground cracked. The mountains in the distance collapsed, and the water nearby dried up and cracked. All trees turned into smoke, and endless fog filled the air. This world was heading towards destruction. Looking again At the entrance of the world, after the smoke dissipated, there was actually a youth standing there. The youth looked to be 17 or 18 years old. His eyebrows were split into 8 colors, and his eyes were like bright stars. He had a heroic spirit. His attire was somewhat unique. White robe, holding a long whip in his hand, and a silver spear on his back. Silver armor, shining brightly. A snow-like cloak, gently fluttering. Silver battle boots, and stepping on auspicious clouds. This boy in silver armor could be said to be endlessly elegant and heroic. However, the killing intent on his body was extremely heavy. Between his eyebrows, there was a sword-like blood groove. 9th stage, eternal realm. That was a god of death. Behind him, there were actually 3,000 light armored cavalry. Each of them wore armor and wore a large cloak. Beneath them, there was a cloud-like white horse. 3,000 lives in the eternal realm. Such an imposing aura, such a lineup. Even Sumo couldn't help but gasp. This was a power that could practically sweep away a middle-level world. Even the corpse-less sect of Dongi Starfield was not this powerful. Who is this? Yi Wuhui couldn't help but ask. But Sumo could only shake her head in her heart. This cultivator, a boy in silver armor. He had never seen him before. Who are you? Chun Yucho asked coldly with his sharp and piercing voice. He also didn't know who the other party was. Demon Moon's Grand State Preceptor Chun Yucho. That a boy in silver armor looked at Chun Yucho, smiled lightly, and asked instead of answering. At the same time, he couldn't help but glance at Sumo, his eyebrows raised imperceptibly. It seemed like, other than Chun Yucho, there was actually a Stage 5 rebirth realm here. But he wasn't afraid, he just didn't like all sorts of surprises. Oh! When Chun Yucho heard this, he couldn't help but be slightly stunned, because in the Demon Moon world, there were already very few people who knew that he was Demon Moon's State Preceptor. Yes, Chun Yucho said proudly. That a boy in silver armor nodded, and then said slowly, Chun Yucho, Demon Moon State Preceptor, Stage 7 Rebirth Realm. You are the trusted aide of the 2nd generation Moon Empress, and have assisted a total of 3 generations of Moon Empresses. Your loyalty is unparalleled. Chun Yucho squinted and didn't speak. You are neither male nor female, neither yin nor yang. Moon Empress calls you Acho. Those who don't know you will taint you and become the demon of Demon Moon. Those who know you will call you the Jade Pillar of Demon Moon. If you exist, Demon Moon exists. If you die, Demon Moon dies. Am I right? A boy in silver armor actually knew Chun Yucho's matters like the back of his hand. Even Chun Yucho didn't tell Sumo about the demon of Demon Moon just now. Who exactly are you? Chun Yucho didn't answer a boy in silver armor's question, but asked coldly. At the same time, he grabbed the air with one hand. The Blood Moon sword was already in his hand. But, compared to before, the Blood Moon sword was much thinner. That was the final form of the Blood Moon sword. At that moment, it was like a blood-red spear. Chun Yucho's hand already started to bleed. Using blood to nourish the sword, man and sword as one. At that moment, the Blood Moon sword and Chun Yucho had already completely fused into one. State Preceptor Chun Yu. A boy in silver armor's expression froze. Then he cupped his fists towards Chun Yucho. This one respects you for your dedication to the Demon Moon Empire. But a boy in silver armor's words changed. I am the Demon Moon world's soul burner. Kill! That a boy in silver armor's sword-like eyebrows rose, and the silver whip in his hand suddenly cracked. Crack! In the air, a silver lightning directly struck. Boom! The fire cloud boundary had already completely collapsed. In the galaxy, that silver whip turned into a perfectly straight silver rod that pierced towards Chun Yucho. Chapter 719. The 9 levels of rebirth were the 9 levels of the Eternal Realm. That level of cultivation in the 3 Realms galaxy was as rare as the morning stars. In the entire 3 Realms galaxy, how many were there at the 9th level of the Eternal Realm? Sumo really did not expect to meet such a person in the tiny demon moon world. Sumo did not expect. Chun Yucho even more so. This a boy in silver armor. Who was he? He should not be a demon moon cultivator. Because Chun Yucho was absolutely confident that he was the #1 cultivator of demon moon. But at this moment, there was no time for them to think. The silver light shot over. Chun Yucho let out a long hiss. That sound was like the mournful cry of a swan before its death. Mournful, resolute, sorrowful. Then, the blood moon sword in Chun Yucho's hand shot out. The fire cloud boundary had completely collapsed. Right now, the battle was in the vast galaxy. The 3,000 light cavalry behind a boy in silver armor did not move much. They were motionless, like statues made of clay. Only the white cloaks that fluttered in the wind showed that they were living cultivators. They were watching the battle. Sumo also did not move. The current situation could be said to be very disadvantageous to Sumo. He could only act according to circumstances. 9th level of the Eternal Realm. This a boy in silver armor could be said to be the strongest enemy Sumo had met in this world. Boom! Bang! At this moment, a boy in silver armor's whip and Chun Yucho's blood moon sword were already clashing. Silver light, blood light. Each held up an umbrella-shaped light screen. In the galaxy, the distance between them was actually hundreds of zhong. Between the two cultivators, two umbrella-shaped light rays faced each other. Each light ray was hundreds of zhong long, illuminating an area. But a boy in silver armor had a faint smile on his lips. He seemed to not be using his full strength. But Chun Yucho's gaze was focused, blood surging. He was activating the Blood Moon Divine Sword with all his strength. Right now, he was one with the sword, fighting with his life. After all, the two of them were two small realms apart. The difference between two small realms in the rebirth realm was like a chasm. In the infinite worlds, how many existences like Sumo were there? The level of one's realm usually determined everything. At this moment, Chun Yucho felt that the power from the perfectly straight silver whip could topple mountains and overturn seas. It was unstoppable. The red glow of his blood moon sword was fading bit by bit. As time went by, the silver light gradually gained the upper hand. Sumo, Chun Yucho is definitely not her match, Yi Wu Hui said worriedly. And Sumo frowned and nodded. However, he was hesitant as to whether he should make a move or not, because he really did not have the confidence to win. Most importantly, Sumo had yet to figure out the origins of a boy in silver armor. Where did this cultivator come from? A hidden demon? However, this youth's body and even the light cavalry behind him did not have any demonic aura at all. Boom! Crack! At this moment, that a boy in silver armor suddenly took a step forward. His steps were steady, his aura like a mountain. At the same time, his wrist shook and the silver whip moved like a spirit snake. With just this, Chun Yucho could no longer block it. Instantly, he felt countless heavenly rivers rushing towards him. He had never felt such a feeling before. No matter how strong one was, they would meet someone even stronger. There was no end to all of this. Bang! The light on the Blood Moon Divine sword suddenly collapsed under the pressure of the silver light. Chun Yucho retreated hundreds of meters, spitting out mouthfuls of blood that stained his robe. His face once again became as white as paper. Anyone could see that he was not her match. Chun Yucho's face was pale, but his eyes were extremely clear. He used his large red robe sleeve to wipe the blood from the corner of his mouth. Originally, Chun Yucho had blush on his face. This smear made his face look even more strange and blood red. White as snow, red as blood. Between red and white was life and death. His 3-chi-tall hat had long been knocked off the Moon Imperial Palace, but the blood-red flower on his temple was still there. A boy in silver armor did not attack. He looked at Chun Yucho as if wanting this Demon Moon's Grand State Preceptor, the #1 cultivator, to die with more dignity. Brother Su, Demon Moon's matter has nothing to do with you. You can leave. At this moment, Chun Yucho slowly plucked the red flower from his temple and said slowly. Then, Chun Yucho put the red flower in his mouth. That red flower was bright red and glistening. It was extremely beautiful. Sumo looked at Chun Yucho and did not speak. But that a boy in silver armor looked at Sumo and said calmly, "Sir, you cannot leave today either, unless you are willing to be my servant and serve me as your master." "Be your servant? Serve you as my master?" Sumo looked at a boy in silver armor and laughed involuntarily. "Young man, who are you? In all the realms, there is no one who can make me serve him as my master." "Oh." A boy in silver armor's gaze focused. He did not take Sumo seriously. But now, when he heard Sumo's tone, his lips twitched coldly. "And who are you?" Such arrogance. A boy in silver armor's words were very interesting. "I am State Preceptor Chun Yu's friend." Sumo looked at a boy in silver armor and said calmly, "I am Sumo." "Sumo?" A boy in silver armor frowned slightly. This name was unfamiliar to him. A nameless person dares to speak so arrogantly? A boy in silver armor pointed at Sumo with the silver whip in his hand. "Either both of you come at me together, or I will kill him and then you." A boy in silver armor was very arrogant. Sumo's eyes narrowed slightly. At this moment, killing intent gradually rose in his heart. "Sumo, he is at the 9th level of Rebirth Realm. We are not confident." Yi Wu Hui said. Sumo did not speak. "Brother Su, leave quickly." At this moment, Chun Yucho shouted. At the same time, he had already swallowed the blood-colored red flower and started chewing. Sumo did not know what that flower was. But Chun Yucho's actions were very strange. A boy in silver armor turned to look at Chun Yucho and laughed coldly. "State Preceptor Chun Yu, this is probably your last resort, right? I heard that this flower was bestowed to you by the Second Moon Empress." Chun Yucho's gaze turned cold. "You really know a lot. These are all MOU's secrets." "Hee." A boy in silver armor laughed. "This is nothing. I have been paying attention to MOU for a long time. In my world, there are many more of these flowers. It is called Fatal Red Demon, a peerless poisonous flower. If you swallow it, you can instantly increase your battle power by several times. But you will not live for more than 6 hours. Why? Even 10 of you are not my match." "Hee." "I know." Chun Yucho chewed for a while, his face full of smiles, as if the fatal red demon still had a lingering fragrance. "But I do not want to live long. Killing a Izong demon is already a gain. Even if I have to tear off a piece of your flesh, it is fine." Chun Yucho's tone was sharp and sinister. Hearing this, Sumo's heart shook. She did not know how Chun Yucho determined that a boy in silver armor was an Izong demon, because that youth did not have a shred of demon aura on him. "Fatal red demon, wisdom poison flower," Yi Wu Hui said slowly. "I heard Ancestral Master mention it before. That a boy in silver armor must have come from the wisdom world." Chapter 720. A boy in silver armor came from the Prajnar realm. Sumo frowned. The Izong demon race was so powerful. One had to know that she and Yi Wu Hui had transmigrated millions of years ago to the Dead Soul's star domain. Then this demon race youth, millions of years later, had he already become a venerable? Before, there was nine-tailed raccoon. Now there was a boy in silver armor. The Izong demon race was indeed powerful. Gagaga, Gigi. At this time, Chun Yucho had already changed. The deadly red demon's medicinal power seemed to have started to take effect. Looking again, Chun Yucho's body shone with red light, like a volcano erupting. His long hair was flying wildly, already blood-red. Chun Yucho's eyes also flashed with blood-red lightning, and his hands also made crackling sounds. Red electric arcs crackled incessantly. At the same time, the skin on his face started to crack, looking ferocious and terrifying. The deadly red demon was extremely poisonous. Before, Chun Yucho had already eaten 3 one-day soul return pills. That was already squeezing out his life force. Now, it was even more poisonous. A boy in silver armor said that Chun Yucho would not live for more than 6 hours. Actually, only Chun Yucho knew that he did not have 6 hours left. He only had less than an hour left. His life was slipping away irreversibly. However, This last bit of time was enough for a battle. Originally, Chun Yu-Cho was only a stage 7 rebirth realm cultivator. However, the power he unleashed at this moment far exceeded his realm. That was a power that could completely match a stage 9 rebirth realm cultivator. Chun Yu-Cho was like a flame that shot into the sky in the star world. He was burning. However, what he was burning was his soul and flesh. This way of dying would definitely be more painful than self-detonation. At that moment, Sumo was slightly moved. He had not felt that for a long time. He had seen such a scene in the 3 realms. The 7 great star lords of Taiwan had all done something similar. For the obsession in their hearts, for the unwillingness in their hearts. In this life, if they did not do so, what joy would there be in life? Chun Yu Moon Empress. At that moment, Chun Yu-Chao's voice became deep and thick and not sharp and piercing. Cho has lived for tens of millions of years. He is worthy of the heavens, worthy of the earth, worthy of MOU. This time, I have no worries, no regrets. I don't have an afterlife, so I can't meet His Majesty again. May Your Majesty be reincarnated endlessly and be in good health for all eternity. Today, forgive Cho for being disrespectful. A boy in silver armor was fighting from afar. The long whip in his hand formed a circle, but he did not attack. His eyes were filled with respect. He gave Chun Yu-Cho the chance to fight with his full strength. With such a nation scholar, how could the country perish? Sumo shook her head and asked in her heart, "The building is about to collapse, and a single tree cannot support it." Yi Wuhui sighed. Hearing this, Sumo nodded and laughed bitterly. Haha, with internal and external troubles, he couldn't do anything about it. Can that Chun Yu-Cho be considered as being born at the wrong time? Not really, Yi Wuhui said confidently. He went through almost the entire Devil Moon Empire and even built the strongest Devil Moon Empire. If he dies today, he should have no regrets. You have to know, everything is impermanent. The strong will fall. Makes sense. Sumo nodded and said, but what did his last sentence mean? What did he disrespect Moon Empress? Yi Wuhui shook his head in the sea of consciousness. She didn't know about this either. Chi, who? At this time, Chun Yu-Cho didn't speak anymore, but started to form seals in the void. His seals were very special. Ghost seal? Sumo couldn't help but be surprised. He had seen this kind of seal in the Dust Sif Sutra. That was a purer hidden technique, Ghost Seal. Hidden Ghost Seal was divided into several types: Ghost Repel Seal, Ghost Summon Seal, and Ghost Destroy Seal. As the name suggested, they were all seals that targeted dead souls. Repel, Ghost Seal, Ghost Summon, Destroy, all 4 seals had their own advantages. At this time, Chun Yu-Cho was actually using Ghost Summon Seal. Ghost Summon Seal naturally summoned dead souls. The more powerful the caster was, the more powerful the dead souls he summoned would be. Who was he summoning? Sumo asked in her heart. At the same time, he suddenly thought of a possibility, and his eyes flashed with shock. Moon Empress Chun Yu, or the first Moon Empress, because only these 2 Moon Empresses were worthy of Chun Yu-Chao's summoning. As expected, following Chun Yu-Chao's seal, golden light erupted in the galaxy, like the sun rising from the east. The originally gloomy galaxy suddenly brightened. Ku, Wong, Mi. The endless chanting was exactly the same as what Sumo heard in the Demon Moon Imperial Palace. But this time, the chanting was even louder, like the Sanskrit of vast universe. Whoosh, whoosh, golden waves rippled. A huge golden lake appeared under Chun Yu-Chao's feet, with a circumference of 300 meters. At the same time, a tall golden figure emerged from the golden lake and slowly emerged from the lake. He was tall, wearing a golden yellow robe, and had a 5-color crown on his head. Looking down on the world, his might was unparalleled, but his eyes were grayish-white, without any spirit. That was a dead soul, not a real cultivator. First Moon Empress? A boy in silver armor was also surprised at this scene. 9 levels of rebirth. The founder of the Demon Moon world. Seems like Chun Yu-Cho still has a trump card. But what's the use? Kill! The silver-armored youth let out a soft shout, and the silver whip in his hand lashed out. The silver light formed a circle and went straight to Chun Yu-cho, because he knew that the Go Summon Seal was a summoning technique. If the caster died, the technique would self-destruct. Seal! Chun Yu-cho put his hands together and then pressed down. This seal hit the surface of the golden lake. Instantly, the waves became tens of thousands of meters high, directly blocking in front of him and the First Moon Empress. The golden water curtain was filled with the power of rebirth. Boom! Pah! The silver whip hit the golden water curtain and was shaken off. Golden water splashed everywhere, like a meteor shower falling in the galaxy. Seemed like the defense was very high. Humph! However, a boy in silver armor sneered. Then he turned his wrist. Looking again, the silver whip in his hand became straight again, and it started to spin at a high speed. Sizzle. In the void, it was like a silver drill. In front of the silver whip, there were endless electric arcs. A boy in silver armor jumped forward, and the silver whip in his hand spun towards the golden water curtain again. Boom! Sizzle. This time, the golden water curtain couldn't stop it. The water curtain collapsed instantly. Chun Yu-cho reacted quickly, and the seal in his hand changed immediately. On the surface of the lake, golden light crisscrossed. The lake water turned into golden water chains, trying to entangle the silver whip. However, the power of the silver whip was extremely strong, especially when it was spinning and the space around it almost formed a vacuum. Wind and rain couldn't pass through, and light couldn't enter. Those golden water chains collapsed directly and fell into the lake. The silver boy's mouth curved, and his wrist moved again. The silver whip was like a long snake swimming in the golden lake, and instantly reached Chun Yu-cho. Sizzle! Sizzle! At this moment, Chun Yu-cho had to dodge. Whoosh! A shadow appeared, and Chun Yu-cho disappeared instantly. And the First Moon Queen appeared in his original position. This was the simplest technique, shadow displacement. However, when a simple technique was practiced to the extreme, it would be an invincible technique. Sizzle! The silver whip directly penetrated the First Moon Queen's body, but it didn't exert any force. Ghost body illusion. A boy in silver armor was a bit surprised. However, he couldn't pull back the silver whip now, because the First Moon Queen made a seal in his hand. At the same time, a spiritual talisman appeared in his hand. Suppress. Chun Yu-cho slapped the spiritual talisman on the silver whip. This time, the silver whip was frozen in the void. God-suppressing talisman. A boy in silver armor's face changed. Chapter 721. The God-suppressing talisman was a venerable level spirit talisman. It could suppress all divine weapons below Lianbua. Even a venerable level divine weapon would be able to freeze for a moment. In a rebirth level battle, life and death were often decided in an instant. Therefore, a God-suppressing talisman could often decide a battle. However, the God-suppressing talisman was extremely difficult to refine. According to legend, it was a spirit talisman that only a hidden Lotus Knight could refine, and even ordinary Venerable Realm experts couldn't refine it. The First Moon Empress actually had a God-suppressing talisman. This was something a boy in silver armor had not expected. It seemed that the First Moon Empress must have had great luck. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to create the Demon Moon Empire, nor would she have been able to obtain such a talisman. Who, at this time, after the First Moon Queen suppressed the silver whip, she flew straight to a boy in silver armor. In the past, the First Moon Emperor was at the 9th level of the Rebirth Realm. But now, he was just a dead spirit and no longer had that kind of power. Otherwise, he would have been able to hold off a boy in silver armor all by himself. Even so, he was summoned, and his power was definitely not to be underestimated. The golden light flew like a rainbow. At the same time, the First Moon Empress made a grabbing motion in the air, and a coiling dragon staff appeared. The staff was 13 feet long, golden in color, and had a coiling dragon engraved on it. It was the divine weapon of the First Moon Empress. Whoosh, the coiling dragon staff swept out, sweeping up boundless power. The entire starry sky seemed to be moving. At this moment, the starry sky was like the sea, rising and falling. From this, it could be seen that the first Moon Empress had broken through the land and opened up a new territory. Unfortunately, you are a dead spirit, the boy in silver armor said regretfully. Otherwise, you would be worthy of being my opponent. But now, I can only let you die once more. Who? Looking again, a boy in silver armor's body suddenly retreated. He wasn't afraid of the first-generation Moon Empress. He retreated so that he could accumulate enough power. At the same time, he shook his shoulders. The silver spear on his back was already in his hand. Silver Qilin's soul-breaking spear, a venerable level divine weapon. That spear was famous throughout the entire Hanya realm. In fact, this spear was a boy in silver armor's life divine weapon. Just now, the silver whip was not his most powerful weapon. With the silver spear in hand, a boy in silver armor's lips curled up. Break! He held the spear in one hand, and the magic cloud beneath his feet suddenly moved, turning into a stream of light. In terms of speed, a boy in silver armor seemed to be faster. The clouds under that young man's feet are a little different. Sumo seemed to be talking to herself, but also seemed to be talking to Yi Wuhui. I can't tell. Yi Wuhui laughed self-mockingly. His realm is too high. However, the cloud under his feet is somewhat similar to the purple cloud under Patriarch's feet. That cloud is alive. The cloud shouldn't be its original form. Sumo squinted her eyes, which instantly turned pitch black. Unfortunately, even with his magic eye, he could not see through it. Although it was launched later, it arrived first. A boy in silver armor shook one of his hands. Instantly, tens of thousands of spear flowers appeared in the void, forming a silver cloud, blocking the way of the first Moon Queen's magic staff. Boom! Crack! In the starry sky, thunder kept raging, and spiritual light shone everywhere. However, in the middle of all this, a boy in silver armor spear suddenly poked out. Silver light shone, and a white light pierced into the first Moon Queen's ribs. Puff! A boy in silver armor did not hesitate. He directly pierced through the first Moon Queen's body. However, this time, he still did not use any strength. However, a boy in silver armor seemed to be prepared. Explode! He curled up the corner of his mouth and spat out a word softly. Looking again, the silver Qilin soul-breaking spear suddenly emitted a light as bright as the sun. At that moment, the sky was full of silver scales like stars in the sky. Boom! Boom! On the silver spear, the endless reincarnation power instantly exploded. The power of this spear was no less than Chun Yu Chao's self-explosion in the Moon Palace. In an instant, clouds rolled in the starry sky like nebulae. Endless power spread to the starry sky. The first Moon Queen's dead soul body suddenly exploded. Tens of thousands of golden lights dazzled people's eyes. In the starry sky, there was no star realm that the black-robed young man had set up that day. The power that was strong enough to shatter a star was rolling in the starry sky. At this moment, even on the Jade Chin star and the Zhu Yin star, people could see the abnormality of this starry sky. After all, they were the closest to this place. From this moment on, the Demon Moon world had actually started to be destroyed. The cultivators on the two stars all felt an ominous atmosphere. However, no one had the ability to change all this. The ghost summoning seal had summoned the first Moon Queen. However, he didn't expect that such a powerful summoner would only last 2 rounds in front of the silver-armored youth. Chun Yucho did not expect this. There is always someone better than you. There was no suspense in the result of this battle. When a boy in silver armor raised the first Moon Queen with his spear, Chun Yucho had already made his move. At this moment, no matter what, he had to make his move, because the power in his body was still bursting out. The medicinal power of the deadly red demon was too strong. At the last moment, Chun Yucho felt that he might lose control and even hallucinate. In front of him, that a boy in silver armor seemed to be an iceberg, and he just wanted to throw himself at that iceberg and extinguish all the burning flames on his body. It did not matter whether he would die together or be a moth flying into the flame. At this moment, Chun Yu-cho had already lost his judgment. In Chun Yu-cho's heart, there was only one obsession. His face was already no longer visible. That was because he had turned into a burning flame. "It's over." Sumo sighed heavily. "Why didn't you make your move?" Yi Wu-hui was puzzled. "If I make my move now, I will have a better chance of winning." "Hee hee. This little chance of winning is negligible." Sumo shook her head. "If I can't win against that youngster, even with the situation just now, I still can't win. Don't forget, behind him, there are still 3,000 immortal light cavalry. That youngster is crazy enough, but he is also strong enough. Let Chun Yu-cho die in a fighting stance." Boom! Whoosh! Chun Yu-cho was like a fiery red star, flying towards a boy in silver armor. His heat was enough to melt the stars. At this moment, whether it was Sumo or the 3,000 light cavalry, they all put up a defensive technique. The silver-armored youth furrowed his brows. This was really not a good situation to deal with. Looking again, the magic cloud under a boy in silver armor's feet suddenly flashed. In reality, he had already dodged Chun Yu-cho. However, that fiery red star actually turned around and charged towards him again. Obsession? A boy in silver armor couldn't help but smile helplessly. At this moment, he understood that the so-called Chun Yu-cho was already dead. However, his last bit of obsession had already turned into his last bit of strength, wanting to perish together with him. However, would that youngster give him the chance? The magic cloud moved. A boy in silver armor had already distanced himself from the fiery red star that Chun Yu-cho had transformed into. At the same time, a boy in silver armor raised his hand and untied the belt of the cloak in front of his chest. Hoo! La la! Like a snow cloak, it expanded with the wind, instantly covering the sky. It was also a magic treasure. A boy in silver armor waved the cloak, directly charging towards the fiery red star. At the same time, his silver whip had already unsealed and returned to his hand. Crack! A boy in silver armor's wrist shook. A silver whip lashed towards a fiery star that was covered by the cloak. Who? The silver whip hit. The star that Chun Yu-cho transformed into carried the power of reincarnation, rapidly colliding with the nearest Zhuyin star. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.